Museum for Human Rights for a one-day exhibit yesterday. It illustrates the Dene's forced relocation from their territory in northern Manitoba to Churchill in 1956 and their eventual return to their land. The artist behind the exhibit says he hopes it offers a new understanding of his people's story. We'll be back with more of that coming up in our next local news at 6:30.
All right. Thanks very much, Heather.
You're welcome.
Heather Wells in the newsroom for us this morning. May McKillop is our show director today, and she'll be covering the commute for us. Abby Adeyemi is our technical producer, covers all of the weather for us. And our YouTube producer is Kevin Nipatebo. And thanks to all of them for being here with us this morning. It's a bit of a brisk morning out there. We're looking at periods of snow beginning later on this morning. A high of -2, but we will have that wind chill. So it will feel like -16 this morning. About -8 by this afternoon. For tonight, periods of snow ending after midnight and then clearing. And then tomorrow, we get to sunshine again and a high of +2. Right now at the Forks, it is -8 degrees. Coming up on our program today, as Heather mentioned, a Saisi Dene First Nation artist says he's thankful he was able to come to Winnipeg and share important stories about his community through art. We will meet this artist coming up after 6 o'clock. Also on the show, with voters likely heading to the polls soon, trade, the economy, and Trump's tariffs are grabbing all of the attention. But what about health care? One of our experts says that should be in the spotlight. World Report is next.
5 perceptive panelists, 5 blockbuster books, 4 days of smart and sassy deliberation and debate, but there can only be one winner. The best book to change the narrative. Hi, I'm Ali Hassan, and I'm hosting Canada's favorite book battle, Canada Reads 2025. One book to change the narrative. All this week on CBC Radio, TV, the Listen app, and CBC Gem. For more, go to cbcbooks.ca.
This is World Report. Good morning, I'm Marcia Young. Prime Minister Mark Carney's whistle-stop tour of Europe is beginning in France. He arrived in Paris in the early hours this morning, and by this afternoon he'll be back on a plane to London. This is Carney's first official trip as Prime Minister, and as Catherine Cullen tells us, he is focused on strengthening ties with allies at a time when the United States is threatening Canadian sovereignty.
The newly sworn-in Prime Minister likely has only days until an election campaign, and Mark Carney is using that time to make a statement about Canada's relationships. He hasn't yet had a phone call with U.S. President Donald Trump, whom Carney has said needs to show respect for Canada's sovereignty. Instead, Carney is doing what one of his senior officials describes as doubling down on some of Canada's other relationships. In Paris, he'll meet with French President Emmanuel Macron to talk about trade and a shared interest in the economic potential of artificial intelligence. He's also visiting the restored Notre-Dame de Paris Cathedral, perhaps evoking some symbolism as an example of rebuilding after a crisis. In London, the Prime Minister will meet with King Charles. Then UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer. Again, chances to increase trade will be on the agenda, but just a few days into office, it's unlikely there will be any major news on that front. Canada and the UK are also keen to talk about security, both European and Canadian. The UK has just hosted a virtual leaders meeting this weekend focused on Ukraine's security. And in a call with President Volodymyr Zelensky on Sunday, Carney invited the Ukrainian president to visit Canada in June for the G7 leaders meeting. This is also a moment for Carney to try to show he's comfortable on the world stage, drawing on his time as governor of the Bank of England and a United Nations special representative. It's a message he's keen to send as Canadians are expected to go to the polls with Trump's trade war looming large on the mind of many. Catherine Cullen, CBC News, Paris.
U.S. President Donald Trump says he will speak with Vladimir Putin tomorrow about ending the war in Ukraine. Washington and Kyiv have agreed to a 30-day ceasefire deal, but the Russian president says he can't agree to it unless some tough conditions are met. Kaya Kallas is the European Union's foreign policy chief.
Those conditions that they have presented, it shows that they don't really want peace, because they are presenting as conditions all their ultimate goals that they want to achieve from the war.
Russia's deputy foreign minister says his country cannot agree to end the war unless NATO agrees to exclude Ukraine from its membership. U.S. President Donald Trump says his deportation of hundreds of Venezuelans over the weekend is legal, even though a judge ordered his administration not to proceed. More than 200 people were rounded up and flown to El Salvador without any due process. Trump's critics call his decision illegal. The CBC's Sarah Levitt is in Washington. And Sarah, take us through the details of what happened.
Yeah, both Trump and his press secretary speaking out on this, saying federal courts don't have a say on how the president deals with foreign affairs. This comes after the White House, using what's called the Alien Enemies Act, deported more than 200 alleged members of a Venezuelan gang. The videos show masked police bringing the prisoners off a plane in El Salvador, where they'll be held in prisons. On Saturday, a federal judge in the U.S. ordered a 14-day halt on all deportations invoked by the act, but the Trump administration said the planes carrying the Venezuelans were already in the air. Here's President Trump.
These were bad people. That was a bad group of, as I say, hombres. You look at them and you look at the crimes that they've committed, you take a look. You don't get any tougher, you don't get worse than that.
So Trump saying what these Venezuelan gangs have done is tantamount to war.
What's been the reaction to the deportation?
Well, El Salvador's president replying to a news headline about the judge's order, simply writing on social media, oopsie, too late. But there are lawyers questioning the lawfulness of the move. The American Civil Liberties Union was involved in the lawsuit against the Trump administration about the use of the Alien Enemies Act. Here's lawyer Lee Gellert.
I think we're on very dangerous ground here. This is as lawless an action as the administration has taken.
Critics also say this raises constitutional issues because government agencies are meant to comply with federal court rulings. The timing of the flights, the exact timings, will have to be looked at as well.
Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you.
The CBC's Sarah Levitt in Washington. Houthi militants in Yemen are vowing to retaliate against the latest U.S. airstrikes. A Houthi spokesperson saying they will target U.S. ships in the Red Sea as long as strikes continue to hit Yemen. He says the U.S. attacked them again last night. The weekend missile strikes killed more than 50 people. Washington says some key Houthi figures are now dead. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth says the U.S. will continue its missile campaign until the Houthi attacks stop. Since November 2023, the Houthis have targeted dozens of ships in the Red Sea. They say it is to support Palestinians trapped in the Israel-Hamas war. Here at home, the end of the Hudson's Bay Company is happening quickly. The historic Canadian retailer is in court today, applying to liquidate all 80 of its stores. Lisa Shing has more.
It's an institution Canadians across the country say they'll miss.
This was one of the last of the department stores that reflected a Canadian identity.
That's too bad, because I grew up with Hudson's Bay, so it's pretty sad.
A week ago, Hudson's Bay Company applied for creditor protection, hoping to keep the business afloat in some capacity. Then a dramatic development. It will start liquidating its entire business as soon as this week, putting more than 9,000 jobs at risk with no guarantee of severance or pension. Toronto lawyer Andrew Hatney represents some employees.
For the company to announce a potential liquidation so fast after filing before the court is unusually quick and very troubling.
In its court application, Hudson's Bay said it was struggling because of the drop in store traffic post-pandemic, people spending less, and Canada-U.S. trade tensions. The filings show the company had just $3 million in the bank at the start of this year and owes nearly $1 billion to creditors, including to landlords and brands like Ralph Lauren and Estee Lauder. In a statement, the company said it made the decision after exhaustive efforts to secure sufficient financing to pursue a restructuring. Ken Wong is a marketing professor at Queen's University.
It has become a nostalgia brand. And nostalgia, unfortunately, is a luxury that really most people won't afford.
Pending court approval, the retailer plans to liquidate its inventory and close up shop by June 15th. Lisa Shing, CBC News, Toronto.
The only Gaelic athletic club in the Maritimes is trying to start a regional league for traditional Irish sports. The Halifax Gaels compete in Gaelic football and hurling, but right now, the club has to travel out of province to compete with other teams. Gareth Hampshire has more on the push to change that.
Eugene McCabe, originally from County Cavan, Ireland, is one of the Gaelic football players, punching, kicking and catching the ball at a Halifax Gaels practice.
You learn this from when you're a kid. It's like hockey here. You grow up with that, starting from under fours all the way up to like senior level.
The game that requires skills used in soccer, rugby and basketball provides a chance for players who've left their home country to celebrate Irish culture, along with hurling, the other game the club plays, which is played with a stick and ball, a bit like lacrosse. The club has grown to about 30 members, but is looking for more competition. Recruitment officer Jen Skinner says they mostly practice against each other, with the closest other team in Quebec.
We don't get a lot of chance to play games. We train throughout the year, but we don't have a lot of times to compete. There's only a couple tournaments a year, and we have to travel for those.
For a small league of 4 teams, another 10 players will be needed. That's what the club's working on while preparing to travel to Montreal for a tournament where it will compete in games in May. Gareth Hampshire, CBC News, Halifax.
Here's a song to wake you up as you kick off your St. Patrick's Day. It's called Give 'Em a Ball and a Yard of Grass by Irish band The Sultans of Ping. Yeah, you're welcome. That is the latest national and international news from World Report. I'm Marcia Young.
Good morning. You're listening to Information Radio on CBC, 89.3 FM, 990 AM, on the app and on YouTube. I'm Margo Watt, sitting in for Marcy Marcusa. Coming up on the show, we'll dive into why some experts say healthcare should be front and center in the upcoming election and what the next government needs to do to improve Canada's healthcare system. On our business report, we'll hear how Canada's counter-tariffs are impacting small businesses and why Canada's oldest company is seeking capital to restructure. And if you're looking for the latest hot collectibles, seems you may have to go back to the 90s. That's because Pokemon is the must-have collector card again. This is Information Radio on CBC. Heather Wells is here in the CBC newsroom this morning. Good morning, Heather.
Good morning. Well, new details have emerged about the 2007 death of Crystal Saunders and the lengths police went to solve her murder. Saunders' body was found in a ditch south of Lake Manitoba in 2007. No credible suspect was identified until 2014 when DNA found on her neck matched Kevin Q. We'll hear what happened next coming up. And a Winnipeg family lost everything in a weekend house fire in River East just before 8 Saturday night. Larry Hobson says his son called to say their home was burning. He says the son and his partner were able to get all 5 kids out. The Canadian Red Cross has put them up in a hotel for now, but we'll hear how they've lost everything coming up in our next local news at 6:30.
All right, Heather, thank you very much. Abby Adeyemi is covering Manitoba weather for us. Good morning, Abby.
Good morning, Margo. Happy St. Patty's Day.
And to you as well. Let me get your opinion on something.
Bring it on.
Years ago, an Irish buddy of mine said, because of St. Patrick's Day, in honor of that, at least once a year on air, instead of Margo Watt, I should be Marg O Watt.
Yeah, Marg O Watt. Yeah, I like that.
So we'll do that?
Well, let's do that.
That's all I have. A green shirt I'm wearing, that's in the name. That's
I
it.
guess we'll just assign you to be serving all the whiskey in the yard.
I can do that.
Guess what we have on the menu today, Margot?
I'm afraid to ask.
It's more of a mix of snow and cloudy conditions.
Right.
Let's look at Winnipeg and surrounding areas. It's -8 in the city at this time under mostly cloudy skies. We're expecting these mostly cloudy conditions to be in play most of the day. However, we have snow starting this morning with some, breezy conditions from the northeast. High for today would get to -2, and then tonight that snow is going to be tapering off after midnight. So we're going to have it on and off till after midnight. Then we'll see some clear conditions as the winds ease. Overnight temperatures will be dropping to around -8. And if we look at other regions, we will see snow and cloudy conditions as well, while the weather will be colder and windier as we travel north. Snow is expected in western Manitoba, the Parkland and Interlake region. We will be seeing snow, and then far north, we will experience much colder temperatures with snow and windy conditions. Thompson at this point is at -28, and the wind chill factored in, it's feeling close to -31, -32. But for Winnipeg today, snow moves in this morning. Cloudy skies, we get a cool high of -2. It then clears overnight. Right now, -8.
Thank you, Abby.
Thank you.
May McKillop is here covering the commute for us today. Good morning, May.
Good morning. Nice to work with you.
You as well. How are things looking?
Pretty quiet so far. No calls on the commuter line. I'm keeping an eye on the southwestern tip of the province. I'm seeing some snow-covered conditions there on 511 Manitoba highways, just south of Highway number 1 through Melita, Delaware area. As well, looking in the city of Winnipeg here, northbound Memorial is closed for construction. That's northbound Memorial closed from St. Mary's to Portage. You can use westbound St. Mary's for the detour. That's all I'm seeing so far, but anything else coming up throughout the commute, I would love to hear about it. You can give me a call. I'll pass that message along to fellow listeners. The number to call is 204-788-3093.
Having his artwork on display at the Canadian Museum for Human Rights meant everything to Jedrick Tharassi. The artist made the trek to Winnipeg from Saisi Dene First Nation over the weekend. My People's Journey, a one-day exhibit, reflects on the journey of the Saisi Dene people. Tharassi says their experience through forced relocation to Churchill in 1956 meant enduring racism, survival, and an eventual return to their land in northern Manitoba. CBC's Gavin Axelrod spoke to Tharassi at the unveiling of the exhibit yesterday.
Very important, and I think the journey affected my people, my family, my mother, which affected me. So it's very important to show people where I come from and what my people have been through. It made me realize some stuff, like I've been through the system and I was a foster kid, so there's a painting of my mom I did. Made me realize I blamed my mom for a lot of stuff that I went through. But in painting these, I realized my mom went through stuff too and I shouldn't blame her, so it's awakening. I had to talk to my mom after that, and I started crying. I just realized my mom went through a lot, and just painting that, that's my mom, and her mom is passed out on the ground, and her dad, I didn't even meet her dad, so it's a learning experience.
What did your mom think of the artwork?
My mom's into Dooley. She tried to come out, but she hasn't even seen it yet.
How long did it take you to put all this artwork together?
I'd say about a little over a year. Some paintings I already had. Some I started late. Some I just finishing now.
For people who are coming to learn about what happened to your people, what do you want them to take away from this exhibit?
Well, aside from just the story, hope I can inspire someone, someone that going through the system or having a rough life. I hope they can take it that I had a rough life and I chased my dream. I made it come true. I hope I can inspire someone.
How special is it for you to have your artwork in this museum here for Canada's human rights?
Very, very important. It's so exciting, so nervous. And it's funny that there's a painting here. I was on council for a while, and the government apologized to the people for moving them for this exact thing. The government came to this museum and apologized to my people for this exact story. And there's a painting of that over there at the end. And I didn't even realize until I was like almost done. So it's funny how everything comes full circle.
Yeah, I was gonna say it's pretty neat that you were there for that apology, and now you're turning it into art that's also going to live in here.
Yeah.
What do you make of that?
It's surreal. It doesn't feel real.
Lionel Houston, I'm the elder from the Dinaway.
What it's like for you to see this exhibit here today?
Well, you know what? It was awesome seeing it because many people don't make it up to these communities. And so to have him bring it to us was phenomenal. I asked lots of questions. I was like, I've been up north, but not that far. So when I look at some of the winter stuff, I think I can relate to that, but I can't relate to there's no trees, right? And it's like, it's so big, and then of course the caribou, yeah, I'm glad he brought it and shared it with us, and a little bit of the story of who they are, their nation, what happened to them. Because I hear about the Ojibwe, I hear about the Cree, I hear about the Sioux, but we don't hear about the Dene. And so he's going to be the one to share that and educate everybody.
So you're even learning a little bit too from this.
For sure, yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, ever since I met the young man, I was learning from him, and a lot of his work is that when I look at it, it's a deeper meaning for me, because it's just what he's showing us is something that when we see it physically, we don't look at it from a holistic lens as to how he lived, how they lived.
That was CBC's Gavin Axelrod speaking with Elder Lionel Houston. Before that, we heard from Saisi Dene artist Jedrick Tharassi talking about his new art exhibit, My People's Journey. It is 6:20. Our new Prime Minister, Mark Carney, is in Paris this morning, and he has given a joint statement right now with French President Macron. Let's listen in.
That cooperation was done through Voyageurs, and now it goes through intelligence networks, quantum computing, and Canada is answering present in the face of these opportunities.
For sovereignty and security, demonstrated by our unwavering support for Ukraine under your leadership. Aujourd'hui,
today, as we're seeing these principles being rejected by more and more governments around the globe, it is more important than ever for Canada to strengthen its ties with its reliable allies, such as France. We must strengthen the cooperation between our two countries to ensure our own security, the security of our allies, and the security of the entire world. We must strengthen our diplomatic ties to address a world that is increasingly unstable and dangerous. We must create more opportunities for our businesses and entrepreneurs, create good jobs for our workers, and create wealth in both of our countries.
With you, Mr. President, I want to ensure that France and the whole of Europe works enthusiastically with Canada, the most European of non-European countries, determined like you to maintain the most positive possible relations with the United States. Canada is a reliable, trustworthy, and strong partner of France, which shares our values and lives them through action during this age of economic and geopolitical crises. Le Canada est fort.
Canada is
Ensemble,
strong.
nous allons être encore
Together,
plus forts.
we will be even
Monsieur le
stronger.
Président, je vous
President
remercie de
Macron,
m'avoir invité.
I want to thank you very much for
Je vous
inviting me,
dans
and I
notre
can
langue
assure you
commune.
that
Que
our
le
common
Canada
language
répondra toujours présent
and
chaque
Canada
fois
will
pour
always be
assurer
there
la
to
sécurité de
ensure
l'Europe,
the security of
pour
Europe
favoriser un commerce
and
prospère,
foster prosperous trade between our countries.
pour coopérer pour la paix,
And of course,
le
cooperate
développement durable et les
in the
droits
name of
universels
peace.
avec la France.
Sustainability is also a universal value.
J'ai hâte
I look forward, therefore, to
d'avoir
working closely
un
with
déjeuner
you
de travail.
and to our working
Merci,
lunch.
cher Emmanuel.
Thank you, dear Emmanuel. Thank you.
That is Canada's new Prime Minister, Mark Carney, speaking in Paris live this morning. This is Mark Carney's first foreign trip as Prime Minister since he was sworn in on Friday. And on Friday afternoon, right after being sworn in, Carney's first order of business was to remove the carbon tax. He signed the order during his first cabinet meeting on Parliament Hill. Here's Carney speaking to his cabinet about the move.
We've already taken a big decision as this cabinet, because this is a cabinet that's focused on action, is focused on getting more money in the pockets of Canadians, is focused on building this economy with all the tools that we have here. So based on the discussion we've had and consistent with the promise that I made and others supported during the leadership campaign, we will be eliminating the Canada fuel charge, the consumer fuel charge, immediately. And we will be ensuring that those Canadians who have received rebates will continue to receive a rebate in the next quarter. The next payment is before the end of April. This will make a difference to hard-pressed Canadians, but it is part of a much bigger set of measures that this government is taking to ensure that we fight against climate change, that our companies are competitive, and the country moves forward. So it's my honor, on behalf of my colleagues, to sign this.
Prime Minister Mark Carney speaking to his cabinet on Parliament Hill on Friday. It is 6:25, minus 8 degrees in Winnipeg. Good morning. I'm Margot Watt, in for Marcy this morning. As the federal election looms, the economy and Donald Trump's tariff strategy are front and center. But healthcare is an issue that might slip through the cracks, and experts believe it deserves equal attention when the parties begin campaigning. For her take on this, we've reached Dr. Joss Reimer. She is president of the Canadian Medical Association and joins us from here in Winnipeg. Good morning.
Good morning.
Healthcare, of course, is a provincial responsibility, but it often comes up as a federal issue as well. Given all the focus on trade and the economy right now, how much will healthcare be an election issue?
Well, we certainly hope that it's a major election issue, because with all the back and forth threat on tariffs, that is enough of a stress on Canadians. The last thing they should have to worry about is their healthcare system on top of all of that. With income being the number one determinant of health, now with people's income being threatened, we know we need a strong health system to protect them from the harms of the economic uncertainty.
What do you think are the most pressing healthcare issues Canadians are facing right now?
Well, Canadians have told us clearly that access is their number one concern. And so we need to make sure we have a system where people can access the care they need. And that means we need to make sure that Canadians can get ongoing care from a family doctor and a primary health team. It means that we need to make sure that our clinicians can share digital health information with each other and with our patients, and that we're bringing in physicians from other countries to safely practice in Canada and see patients here.
Issues, of course, we've been hearing about for some time. What more can be done to make healthcare more accessible for Canadians?
We need to make sure that our healthcare professionals are practicing in the most efficient way possible. And that means reducing some of the paperwork that they're doing, because they spend 10 to 19 hours a week, our family doctors do, on paperwork. And so that means getting rid of sick notes. It means that we need to get rid of some of the forms or decrease the length of the forms that they're filling out. But we also need to be looking at things like fighting false information that is online, being bombarded at us from all over the globe, because that also is increasing the burden on the health system, because it's increasing preventable infections, childhood mental illness, and other diseases. And I also want to see us focusing on Indigenous people's health by improving Indigenous-led healthcare services.
How do you think the political climate in Canada will impact healthcare discussions in the upcoming election?
Well, we know a federal election is going to be called any day now, and so we are urging every political leader who's aspiring to be an MP, and certainly the Prime Minister, to focus on healthcare. It's always a pressing issue for Canadians, regardless of the geopolitical situation. But right now, when people's incomes are at threat, we need that system to be there to help mitigate the impacts of the harm that we're already seeing.
What are the main issues you think the next government should focus on to improve Canada's healthcare system?
Well, we want to focus on a number of things at the same time. We need more doctors, so that means increasing the class sizes. We also need to have stronger healthcare teams, and we want to see investments going into that primary care team so that the nurse practitioner, the pharmacist, the social worker can all work together in the same space, sharing a health record, providing care to Canadians in a more efficient way.
Dr. Reimer, thanks for your time.
Well, thank you so much for having me.
That's Dr. Joss Reimer, president of the Canadian Medical Association. She joined us here in Winnipeg this morning.
Winkler and Morden, let's talk. CBC wants to get to know you a little bit better. I'm Rosanna Hempel. CBC's Communities in Focus is coming to Winkler and Morden March 17th to 21st. What do you want us to know about your communities? What stories are we missing? I can't wait to meet you. Visit cbc.ca/Manitoba/community for details.
Still to come here on Information Radio, we were just talking about the election, which we know is looming, the election call expected any day now. And Dr. Joss Reimer was talking just then about healthcare, hoping that's a big issue during the election. Well, also people are thinking about voter turnout already. As the political landscape has shifted with a new prime minister in place, we will take a look at voter turnout. That's coming up after 6:30. Also coming up after the news at 6:30, our business report, and we'll take a look at how Canada's counter-tariffs are already impacting small businesses. So that's still to come here on Information Radio. We're at -8 degrees here in Winnipeg. We'll have a complete look at the Manitoba forecast, a look at weather across the province. That's coming up after the bottom of the hour as well. I'm Marco Watt, in for Marcy Marcusa this morning, and you're with Information Radio here on CBC Radio, 89.3 FM, 990 AM, on the app, and you can watch us on YouTube. Time now for CBC News.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Heather Wells in Winnipeg. At 6:30, it is -8. Expect a bit of snow in Winnipeg for St. Patrick's Day. The wind northeast at 20, a high today of -2, just slightly cooler than seasonal. A family of 7 lost everything they owned in a weekend house fire in River East. It happened at a bi-level house on Hathaway Road just before 8 Saturday night. Larry Hobson had just dropped groceries off for his son. Then he got a call saying their home was burning.
My son and his partner and their 5 children ran across to the neighbors, and my son ran to the fire department from here because it's a block away, and his bare feet. But he got his kids out, which was the main thing. The houses are right up.
The 5 children range in age from 7 months to 11 years old. Hobson says the house had insurance, but as renters, his son's family did not. The Canadian Red Cross has provided the family with temporary shelter at a hotel. New details have emerged about the 2007 death of Crystal Saunders and the lengths police went to solve her murder. CBC I-Team's Caroline Bargout reports.
Crystal Saunders was 24 years old when her body was discovered in a community on the shore of Lake Manitoba. 7 years later, the DNA evidence found on her neck matched Kevin Q, which was obtained when he was investigated for sexual assault in BC. RCMP believed he had killed Saunders, so they set up a Mr. Big operation. These details are all revealed in search warrant documents obtained by CBC News. Undercover officers spent 7 months getting close to Q, going to Canucks games and skydiving. They even staged a hotel room to look like something violent had happened, which Q helped clean up. The investigation ended in January 2024. That's when Q was charged. His trial starts in September. Caroline Bargout, CBC News, Winnipeg.
Prime Minister Mark Carney's whistle-stop tour of Europe is beginning today in France. Carney arrived in Paris in the early hours this morning. By this afternoon, he'll be back on a plane in London, on his way to London. This is Carney's first official trip as Prime Minister, and he's focused on strengthening ties with allies at a time when the United States is threatening Canadian sovereignty. Now, U.S. President Trump last night saying he has no intention of creating any exemptions for his tariffs on steel and aluminum, and he says reciprocal tariffs are coming in 2 weeks.
April 2nd is a liberating day for our country. We're going to be getting back some of the wealth that very, very foolish presidents gave away because they had no clue what they were doing.
Trump has threatened to impose tariffs on Canadian dairy and lumber products, although White House officials have suggested Canada could renegotiate a trade deal with Washington. The Hudson's Bay Company will be in Ontario Superior Court today to advance a creditor protection case. It's preparing for a potential wind down of its operations unless it can find a last-minute solution to save it. The closure of the entire HBC business would mean job losses for more than 9,000 employees. The historic company, which is now under American ownership, is expected to seek legal permission from the court to liquidate its assets. You can hear the latest national and international news coming up on World Report at 7. The journey of the Saïsi Dene people was on display through art at the Canadian Museum for Human Rights. The one-day exhibit illustrates their forced relocation from their territory in northern Manitoba to Churchill in 1956 and their eventual return to their land and traditional way of life. Jedrick Tharassi is the artist behind this work. He says one of the paintings of his mother had deeply personal impact.
I blamed my mom for a lot of stuff that I went through. But in painting these, I realized my mom went through stuff too, and I shouldn't blame her, so it's awakening.
Tharassi hopes the exhibit offers a new understanding of his people's history. Well, the Winnipeg Jets are all alone at the top of the NHL standings.
Kyle Connor in, Connor to the net, scores! Who is any quicker than Kyle Connor?
Kyle Connor in the second period there on TSN with the tying goal against Seattle. Winnipeg goes on to take it in overtime with a goal by Dylan Samberg on a pass from his former roommate Cole Perfetti. Head coach Scott Arneal.
The old two roommates there, him and Fetz tagging up, but nice to see. He logged a lot of minutes, and he can be a horse for us when he plays like that.
The Jets beat the Kraken 3-2. Now Winnipeg is in first place, 2 points ahead of the Washington Capitals, and Winnipeg continues their road trip tomorrow in Vancouver. You can find more news updated throughout the day at cbc.ca/Manitoba.
So exciting, Heather, that they're at the top.
I love it.
I mean, they tried to release the Kraken. The Jets said, hey, get out of here. Thank you, Heather.
I like that.
Thank you, Heather.
You're welcome.
Let's take a look at our forecast across Manitoba. Here's Abby.
Good morning. We're looking at mostly cloudy conditions across board today, with the southern region seeing snow this morning. Winnipeg at -8 at this point. We're seeing some cloudy conditions. The snow will be moving in this morning. Expected to be light and breezy at some point, and this will take us into the evening period when it tapers off overnight. -2, we warm up to similar conditions we're seeing in the Pembina Valley region. However, we're already seeing this patchy snow falling towards the U.S. border. So for Morden, Winkler, Altona, Morris, you're already feeling the snow coming your way. We should be seeing about 2 to 4 centimeters on the ground once the system passes through that region. In the Westman region, Brandon sitting at -9 at this time. Mostly cloudy skies you're seeing. We have a chance of 5 to 10 centimeters of snow today for the Westman region. Winds will be light, highs around -5. In the Parkland region, Dauphin is currently at -19, mostly cloudy at this time. Light snow likely throughout the day. Highs will be around -6 tonight. The snow continues with temperatures dropping to -12. In the Interlake region, also a slim chance of snow in the Gimli area, where temperature at this time is around -16. Highs will be near -2. The winds will stay light for the region. Now we track it from the south central part into the northern region. The powerful influence surrounding areas, temperatures hovering around -29, -30 at this time. Partly cloudy skies we're seeing. Expect some sunshine this morning. Then the clouds will roll in later. You warm up to around -6 later. Up in Thompson, -28 and clear. The high will be around -9. There's a chance of flurries tonight. Temperatures will be dropping to around -15. And then we travel further north into Churchill, where we're seeing a light snow blowing around at this time with temperatures around -22. The snow should be ending around the noon period. Your highs will be around -16 and temperatures will be dropping to around -24. Later tonight, though, the wind chill feels like -38. So across board today, we are seeing cloudy skies and snow in many areas, especially the south will be getting some snow this evening with cool temperatures to come with that. And then the further north you go, the colder it gets. But right now, Winnipeg, we are at -8 and snow is moving in this morning, so prepare for that.
All right. And I know it's still March.
Let's just call it T-0 days to spring.
I like that. Let's just get this over with and then move forward. All right. Very good. Thank you, Abby.
Thank you.
Let's take a look at traffic so far this morning with me.
No big major closures or delays to report, but I'm taking a look at the highways across the province, and most things south. I'm seeing most things south of Highway Number 1 are partly covered conditions, particularly in the southwestern side of the province through Melita and Delaware, as well on Highway 75 to south to Emerson if you're heading south out of the city of Winnipeg. As well, just looking at some closures in the city here. Northbound Memorial is closed for construction, so it's closed from St. Mary's to Portage, and westbound St. Mary's is the detour there. And as well, close to there, Colony is closed between St. Mary's and Portage, so a short closure, but we might see some downtown delays because of that. Anything going on in the commute, give me a call and let me know, and I will pass that message on. The number to call is 204-788-3093.
All right, May, thanks very much. At 6:39, let's check in with Neil Kumar on the business desk this morning. Good morning, Neil.
Good morning.
So we understand that Canada's tariffs are now impacting small businesses.
Yes, small businesses are getting hurt by the counter tariffs, but 75% of the owners say that they still support the retaliatory tariffs. For instance, the owner of a small business in Pickering, Ontario has learned that they'll have to pay a 25% tariff on merchandise coming into their lacrosse equipment store. Billions of dollars and thousands of jobs are now at stake as Canadian businesses struggle with U.S. President Donald Trump's tariffs, and the bulk is set to take effect on April 2nd. However, there are some businesses that are unaffected by Trump's tariffs, but they're learning that they won't emerge unscathed from the trade war, as goods they import from the U.S. will get hit with Canada's counter tariffs. Last week, the federal government imposed its first round of 25% retaliatory tariffs on $30 billion worth of American goods, which will be applied to many types of food items and appliances.
Now, also, Canada's oldest company is seeking capital that it needs to restructure.
That's right. Hudson's Bay announced on Friday that it'll begin liquidating its entire business this week unless it can find a more viable path forward. And that means there are over 9,000 jobs at risk. The department store has 80 locations that have been forced towards a full liquidation due to what it says have been exhaustive efforts that have not turned up the financing needed to help its empire survive. A closure of the entire business would also affect 3 Saks Fifth Avenue stores and 13 Saks Off Fifth locations that it owns through a licensing agreement. The company's plea for help comes about a week after it laid bare its financial struggles in a creditor protection application that it made with the Ontario Superior Court of Justice. Hudson's Bay's filing shows that the company owes $950 million to landlords, suppliers, and other partners, including fashion heavyweights Ralph Lauren, Chanel, Columbia Sportswear, Diesel, and Estee Lauder. The historic Canadian retailer is in court today, applying to liquidate all 80 of its stores.
And we'll follow that with interest today. And Neil, we're learning that stock futures have fallen.
That's correct, and they have fallen after the Dow posted its worst week since 2023. Last night, Dow futures slid by 168 points, and the S&P 500 and NASDAQ 100 futures dropped by 0.5%. Wall Street is coming off another brutal week of equities. The NASDAQ Composite sank deeper into correction territory last week, while the small-cap Russell 2000 neared a bear market, or 20% off from its high. The S&P 500 briefly dipped into a correction as well, before snapping back above that level. And it appears Wall Street is headed for a big markets week. The U.S. Federal Reserve is widely expected to keep interest rates steady at the conclusion of its latest policy meeting on Wednesday. Futures continue to look negative this morning.
And what's happening on the market so far this morning?
So in Europe, markets are set to open the new trading day higher. Germany is up UK is up, France is up, and Asian markets have mostly climbed today. Japan is up, Shanghai is up, Hong Kong is also up. Oil is up 92 cents to $60.10 US per barrel. Gold is up $7.70 to $3,008 US per ounce. And the Canadian dollar is down 0.03 cents to 69.6 cents US.
Right, Neil, thanks very much.
You're very welcome.
That is Neil Kumar with the Business Report. I'll remember when everyone was clamoring to get those Taylor Swift tickets. For many, the only way to get them was to buy them on the secondary market or from scalpers. Well, it's happening again, but this time it's for Pokemon cards. Yeah, those trading cards that were all the rage in the 90s are all the rage again. CBC's Philip Drost has more.
It is rough right now.
That's Jake Wegman. He's a 23-year-old Pokemon card collector in Toronto. He's been collecting cards since he was a kid, but lately, it's been difficult.
All of a sudden, people are just like seeing Pokemon, like the Pokemon brand, and they're buying up product, and they don't even know what they're buying because they think it'll be valuable. And it's like to make like, $50 here, $20 there, and it's like it's frankly ruining it for the people that actually want to collect and want to play.
Jake used to be able to walk into a big box store or local game store and buy a few packs of cards without much difficulty. Now, the store shelves are empty. He says that's because scalpers are buying up mass amounts of these packs, sometimes before they even hit the shelves. Then, they're selling them for double or triple the suggested retail price. It's making the hobby expensive for some and unaffordable for others. Pokemon cards were first released in North America in 1998. Kids begged their parents to buy them packs with the hopes of finding a holographic Charizard. Back then, a pack of 11 cards was just $3 or $4, and easy to find. But since then, Pokemon has completely taken off. The Pokemon Company boasts retail sales in the billions. In the last fiscal year, the company sold over 11 billion trading cards. That's the most it's sold ever. So what's going on now? Well, it all started a few months ago. A few times a year, the Pokemon Company will release a new collection of cards featuring its characters with new artwork. In November, it released a set called Surging Sparks. Those packs gave fans a chance at pulling a particular artwork of the ever-popular Pikachu. And since chances of getting the card were low and the demand was high, it sold on the secondary market for over $1,000. That had people excited. But that hype was cranked up when Pokemon released its next set. In January, Pokemon launched Prismatic Evolutions.
So it was pretty wild. Something I've never seen before, really.
That's Sebastian Bilodeau. He's the assistant store manager at Exor Games in Charlottetown. He says when the Prismatic Evolution set was released, they had a lineup around the building.
Keep in mind, this is like January. Like, people are waiting outside for 2-3 hours in the freezing cold. And by the end of it all, like 9:30, 10 o'clock, there's a lineup outside the door around our building. 50, 60 people.
They sold out within an hour of opening their doors. And now people are scouring to get any Pokemon cards they can get their hands on. And stores can't get the stock in fast enough. As you can hear in this video posted on YouTube, there was even people pushing and shoving to get a deal on a box of cards at Costco. Shortly after, that special release was showing up online for well over double the retail price. Scalping is nothing new, of course. Concert ticket scalping made headlines during Taylor Swift's Eras tour, and there's a long history of scalpers using bots to buy up limited edition sneakers. But it's new to Pokemon. And longtime collector Charlene Sutherland from Toronto says it's a bad look.
Seeing videos of people who are literally getting into fistfights at Costco over Pokemon cards also has just brought a completely negative connotation to the community. I think it's as a whole because everyone sees this, IP that originally was meant for kids being continued on with adults, and there's nothing wrong with that. But I think when you see videos of grown adults going and fighting over Pokemon cards, knowing that It's also ruining this experience for parents and kids who are trying to get into it. Just puts a bad taste, I think, in most of the community's mouth.
Sebastian says Exor Games is making efforts to limit scalping at their store. Instead of putting all their product online, they keep a large percentage for in-store purchases. On big release days, they cap how much each customer can buy. And Jordan Hennessy says it's going to be key for businesses to take those steps. He collects the cards and runs a trading card stall at a flea market in Kelowna, BC. He's concerned that if children can't get the cards, it could hurt the Pokemon community long term.
Yes, people like myself are getting an opportunity to make money off of this hobby, but it is the younger generation that always drives it. It is the younger, it's the, 7, 8-year-old to 15, 16-year-old that will always keep it relevant and keep Pokemon printing stuff, keep Pokemon making TV shows and video games and you name it, right? Without that demographic there, it makes it impossible to sustain the hobby.
There's hope that the Pokemon Company will pick up on the demand and print more of these popular sets. But until then, the best chance people have at getting their favorite cards is finding out when their local store gets new stock or paying a scalper's asking price. For CBC Radio, I'm Philip Drost.
Every corner of Canada deserves a voice. Local news connects us from coast to coast to coast. CBC is expanding local news locations all over the country, and we're looking for storytellers. Help us tell your story and make a difference in your community. Visit cbc.ca/workwithus to apply today.
There has been a lot of attention on Canadian politics over the past few months. We now have a new Prime Minister in Mark Carney, who was sworn in on Friday, and it's widely expected he'll call an election soon. Given the turmoil with tariffs and U.S. President Donald Trump, how much will all of this influence voter turnout when Canadians go to the polls? For her perspective, we have reached Lydia Miljan. She's a professor of political science at the University of Windsor and a senior fellow with the Fraser Institute. She joins us via Zoom. Good morning.
Good morning, Margot.
So Mark Carney has been Prime Minister, as we know, for just a few days now, but there's been much speculation that he'll call an election sooner rather than later. Given all that's been going on in politics lately, what do you expect to happen with voter turnout when we do head to the polls?
Oh, yeah, that's a tough question. Voter turnout's been on the decline over the last couple election cycles. Actually, over the last few decades, we saw an uptick in voter turnout in 2015. And I certainly do liken that to the fact that Justin Trudeau was able to mobilize the vote. I always say it's not that Stephen Harper lost that election. They only were down 200,000 votes. It's that Justin Trudeau handily won it. He increased the vote share for the Liberals by 3 million. About 1 million of them were defectors from the NDP, but there were 2 million that hadn't previously voted in the last election. And a lot of those were young people who were really energized by his youthful, appearance, the fact that he was making some bold promises, such as, legalization of marijuana and electoral reform. And so there was real excitement at the time, and clearly that's why they won that majority government. But since then, voter turnout's been on the decline, especially young people. And over the last 2 election cycles, the Conservatives actually got more votes than the Liberals. It's just they weren't able to translate those into seats.
Do you expect the tariff debate to have a big impact on turnout?
I don't, in part because all the parties seem to be saying the same thing. There's not a lot of policy difference between the Liberals, Conservatives, NDP, Bloc. They're all saying we got to fight tariff for tariff. We've got to, increase interprovincial trade. And so when there's no real differences between the parties, I don't see that as being a real motivator to get out to vote. We certainly didn't see it as a huge motivator in the Ontario election campaign, which is basically fought on the same issue. So the parties, if they want to get the vote out, they've got to mobilize them on something else, something that really affects people's day-to-day lives.
So are there some other issues then that might cause a spike in voter turnout?
Well, certainly, I think the cost of living is something that the Conservatives have been banking on. I mean, it suggested to me that at least over the last couple of years, their rise in the polls was because they were there where Canadians were. They were basically identifying the problems that Canadians agreed with, such as housing, such as cost of living, and even the fact that there was the carbon tax. So I think those things will still be in play, and especially the carbon tax is an interesting one because even though Mark Carney, dramatically signed the order in council, which isn't how it works in Canada, but we'll put that aside. He didn't actually repeal the carbon tax. All he was able to do through regulation is reduce it to zero. They have to they have to be in the House of Commons to repeal that legislation. So I think that the Conservatives will have a legitimate point to make about, okay, you said you're going to get rid of it, but you also said you wanted a shadow carbon price.
So what do you think?
What are you going to replace it with? And so I think that that's going to motivate Conservatives. And I think Conservative voters, the base is pretty angry with the current government, and they are motivated to change. The question is, will there be enough Liberal supporters who now are at least calmed by the fact that Mark Carney's at the helm, that they're going to come back to the party?
And what do you think? You mentioned the signing that we saw with the carbon tax on Friday. Are you thinking every time something happens now in this country, there's going to be an official signing and we're gonna see it?
That's, that's hilarious because on the one hand, Carney's saying that, Pierre Poilievre is just like Donald Trump. And then what does he do? He does the exact same thing Donald Trump does. Terrible optics. I mean, people say, well, it's symbolic and all that, but the symbols matter in politics. And so they've got to be careful that they don't get too clever by half, that they don't mimic Donald Trump too much, because that is going to turn Canadians off. I mean, I think the other thing that we all agree on is nobody likes Donald Trump. And so you don't want to be too closely associated with either his gimmicks or his rhetoric. And I think it's also interesting for the Liberals that they're not negotiating with Donald Trump right now. They're playing it very safe. And again, that's going to be, I don't know what effect that has on voter turnout, but it is going to raise some questions about whether or not Mark Carney is afraid of Donald Trump.
Now, when we talk about the economic climate, how might that affect young people specifically and their engagement in the upcoming election?
Yeah, I think, a party that can convince young people that they are able to help them out, and not so much in terms of dependency, because I don't know if young people want to be dependent on the state, but in terms of just getting a fair shot. A lot of young people just feel that they've been pushed out of the labor market. They've certainly been pushed out of the housing market, and their inability to step out on their own is really frustrating for a lot of them. So parties that can able to show and demonstrate that they have a plan for the young people to get out into the world and live their best lives could be enough to motivate them to come out to the polls.
Given the current political climate, Professor, do you think we'll see a significant change in voter turnout compared to previous elections?
I honestly, I don't. If the evidence of the Ontario election is anything to go by, it doesn't seem to be. It's the same context that we had, it's the same time period, and it could actually be a suppressor. The battleground is going to be Ontario. Let's face it, that's where the seats are, and I think that the parties really have to motivate people in Ontario, and it seems to me that in Ontario, we're very concerned about jobs when it comes to the auto sector, but it almost feels as if there's consensus that they don't think any one political party is going to be able to solve this, and so that might be a problem for turnout.
Professor, thanks for joining us this morning.
Thank you, Margot.
Lydia Miljan is a professor of political science at the University of Windsor and a senior fellow at the Fraser Institute. Our time right now is 6:56. Let's get the very latest from our Winnipeg newsroom with Heather Wells.
Good morning. Well, a Winnipeg family lost everything in a weekend house fire in River East. Happened on Saturday night. Larry Hobson says he just had dropped groceries off at his son's house on Hathaway Road. And then a few hours later, his son called to say the home was burning. He says they did manage to get all their children out safely. The Canadian Red Cross now is putting them up at a hotel. A woman from Buffalo Point First Nation feels like she was intentionally targeted in a hit and run. Margaret Cobanis says she was walking near Osborne Station early Saturday morning when a white van knocked her to the ground and drove over her before backing up and speeding off. The mother of two now is recovering from surgery. We'll hear more of the story in our next local news coming up at 7:30.
All right. Thank you very much, Heather. A quick traffic note for us this morning. Traffic northbound Route 90 between Ellis to Dublin. We just had a call on the traffic line telling us about debris on the road, particularly bad in the right-hand lane between Ellis to Sargent heading northbound. So thanks for the call on that. And if you do have any updates for us from the road, we appreciate your calls. The traffic number is 204-788-3093. We're at -8 degrees here in Winnipeg, but feeling brisk this morning with a northeast wind. Looking at wind chills, feeling like -16 this morning and about -8 by this afternoon. It will be mostly cloudy today with periods of snow this morning. Periods of snow again tonight, and then clearing, and then that makes room for sunshine tomorrow and a high of +2. Again, right now in Winnipeg, it is -8 degrees. Still to come here on Information Radio, we will meet a Winnipeg record collector after 7 o'clock who has so many old-time vinyls. He actually lives in a warehouse just to house them all. And in recent months, we've been talking a lot about the Trump tariffs on Canadian goods, but one Manitoba farmer says we should be shifting our focus to tariffs on canola imposed by China, which he says could be detrimental to canola farmers. We'll explore that issue coming up on Information Radio. I'm Margot Watt, in for Marcy Marcusa. Nice to have you with us. Good morning. Happy Monday. Happy St. Patrick's Day. World Report is next.
Today on The Current.
Good evening from New York. I'm Chris Hayes. A lot has happened on Capitol Hill.
Everything in the information age is designed to steal our attention. So says MSNBC host Chris Hayes. But he also says it's possible to take back control of our lives, our politics, and our future. Chris Hayes coming up on The Current.
The Current with Matt Galloway. This morning at 8:37, 9:07 in Newfoundland. And on the CBC Listen app.
This is World Report. Good morning. I'm Marcia Young. Prime Minister Mark Carney is in Paris on his first official visit abroad.
Le Canada est fort.
Canada is strong.
Nous allons être encore
Together, we will be even stronger.
Carney is meeting right now with French President Emmanuel Macron. Then he's back on a plane to London. It is a busy day aimed at shoring up relationships with some of Canada's allies at a time when Ottawa's relationship with the United States is deteriorating. The CBC's Catherine Cullen is covering the trip. And Catherine, we just heard from the two leaders. What did they have to say?
It was a mix of warm words and warnings about economic and geopolitical crises. At a time when Canada is looking for support from its allies, French President Emmanuel Macron spoke of Canadians who fought on the beaches of Normandy and Canada's recent support of Ukraine. He talked about the problems caused by tariffs, including creating inflation, but he did not make an explicit, overt call for the U.S. president to back off on his attacks on Canadian sovereignty. Prime Minister Mark Carney made it clear he is on a mission to move closer to allies in terms of trade and security.
I want to ensure that France and the whole of Europe works enthusiastically with Canada, the most European of non-European countries, determined like you to maintain the most positive possible relations with the United States.
Earlier today, Carney visited the restored Notre Dame Cathedral, which was severely damaged by fire. Carney says it is a reminder that in a crisis, you must act.
What is next for the new Prime Minister?
Marcia, he's headed to London, where he'll have an audience with the King, then on to a meeting with UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer. Carney has suggested he isn't looking for allies to offer assurances that Canada will never become America's 51st state. But one senior official says on this trip, Carney is trying to, quote, double down on relationships with Canada's other allies.
Thanks, Catherine.
Thank you.
The CBC's Catherine Cullen reporting from Paris. U.S. President Donald Trump says he will speak with Vladimir Putin tomorrow about ending the war in Ukraine. The Russian president says he supports the idea of a ceasefire, but has raised several conditions. As Briar Stewart reports, many in the West see those conditions as delay tactics to drag out the talks.
Doing pretty well, I think, with Russia.
As U.S. President Donald Trump spoke to journalists aboard Air Force One, he said that he will be speaking with Vladimir Putin Tuesday, after a lot of work was done over the weekend to try and secure a ceasefire in Ukraine.
We'll be talking about land, we'll be talking about power plants, dividing up certain assets.
Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky called the discussions around territories complicated, saying that Ukraine will never recognize its occupied land as Russian. Last week, Putin said he agreed to the idea of a ceasefire, but then spoke at length outlining what he saw as obstacles, like would the 30-day truce give Ukraine a chance to mobilize more troops and secure additional weapons.
Those conditions that they have presented, it shows that they don't really want peace, because...
EU Foreign Policy Chief Kaja Kallas says that's clear because Putin's conditions include his ultimate goals for his invasion of Ukraine. European countries, along with the UK, are meeting to discuss what happens if there is a ceasefire and who will monitor it. While France and Britain have committed to putting peacekeepers on the ground in Ukraine, Russia has repeatedly said that it will not support that. Briar Stewart, CBC News, London.
U.S. President Donald Trump is defending his use of a centuries-old law to deport more than 200 Venezuelans to El Salvador. Trump claims they are violent criminals, but he has not offered any evidence of that. And the U.S. president has invoked the Alien Enemies Act of 1798. It's a wartime power allowing non-citizens to be deported without legal recourse. Last night on Air Force One, Trump told reporters his action is justified.
And these are criminals, many, many criminals. Murderers, drug dealers at the highest level, drug lords, people from mental institutions. That's an invasion. They invaded our country. In that sense, this is war. In many respects, it's more dangerous than war because, in war they have uniforms. You know who you're shooting at. You know who you're going after.
On Saturday, a judge ordered the deportations stopped, but the White House said that order carried no legal authority. The flight carrying the Venezuelans had already left U.S. airspace. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu wants to dismiss the head of Shin Bet, Israel's intelligence service. He says there is a growing distrust in his relationship with Ronen Bar. But critics say this is part of Netanyahu's effort to frame the October 7th Hamas attack as Shin Bet's failure. Crystal Gomansing has more from Jerusalem.
In a recorded statement to Israeli citizens, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu used the war, which he said is being fought on 7 fronts, as justification to dismiss Israel's top security official. I have an ongoing lack of trust in the head of the Shin Bet security service, a distrust that has only grown over time, he said late Sunday night. Ronen Bar has more than a year left in his term as the director of Israel's security agency. In a letter, Israel's attorney general promptly rejected Netanyahu's plan until the factual and legal basis for the decision was reviewed. Bar faced pressure from Netanyahu to resign last week, but refused. Local media reports say he is determined to stay on until all of the hostages are returned, and he's completed several sensitive investigations. One of those investigations, allegations top aides of Netanyahu's were paid by Qatar while at the same time handling negotiations. At a rally outside of the Defense Ministry headquarters in Tel Aviv, word of Barr's dismissal spread. Ifat Calderon, a family member of a former hostage, says now is not the time and praised Barr's efforts.
I believe that offer my cousin is back home because of Ronen Bar as well.
Netanyahu says he'll bring the matter to the government Wednesday. Crystal Gamansing, CBC News, Jerusalem.
Houthi militants in Yemen are vowing to retaliate against the latest U.S. airstrikes.
تأتي هذه العمليات للقوات المسلحة اليمنية.
A Houthi spokesperson saying they will target U.S. ships in the Red Sea as long as strikes continue to hit Yemen. He says the U.S. attacked them again last night. The weekend missile strikes killed more than 50 people. Washington says some key Houthi figures are now dead. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth says the U.S. will continue its missile campaign until the Houthi attacks stop. Since November 2023, the Houthis have targeted dozens of ships in the Red Sea. They say it is to support Palestinians trapped in the Israel-Hamas war. New Brunswick's health minister says his province is just on the edge of supporting a new model of primary care. It's a unique approach to tackling the physician shortage in Canada. And for one region, help can't come fast enough. It has just 2 doctors for 10,000 people. Rachel Cave has been taking a closer look as part of our CBC News series, The Cure.
So maybe 45% of patients that are seen at this clinic don't have a primary care provider.
Dr. Stuart Lockhart says the old model of family medicine has to change because a solo doctor cannot serve the thousands of patients orphaned by physician retirements in the upper St. John River Valley, a stretch of small communities in New Brunswick's west. That's why a local council there helped him build a state-of-the-art clinic that has almost everything.
We would have 4 physicians or nurse practitioners here at all times. We would have evening clinics. We would have a weekend service.
Recruitment is a province-wide problem. The health department says as of October 2024, there were 150 general practitioner vacancies. Health Minister John Dornan says help is coming.
But what they need there is the staff.
Dornan says the province won't have the best salaries in the country for doctors, but the entire incentive package, including paying physicians overhead and support staff salaries, will put it out front.
In New Brunswick, we will lead. And we will have a better package here than anywhere in the country.
Dornan says the compensation details won't be released while contract negotiations are underway. Overall, he says, he's bullish the government will be able to attract young doctors and deliver on its promise to open 10 team-based clinics within a year. Rachel Cave, CBC News, Carlton North, New Brunswick.
And that is the latest national and international news from World Report. News anytime, cbcnews.ca. I'm Marcia Young.
Morning. You're listening to Information Radio on CBC, 89.3 FM, 990 AM, on the app and on YouTube. I'm Margot Watt, sitting in for Marcy Marcusa. Coming up on the show, a Buffalo Point First Nations woman wants justice after she survived a hit and run in Winnipeg over the weekend. She spoke with CBC after her surgery and shares her story with us. We have the latest in our special series of stories by the student filmmakers of the CREATE program. And why one Manitoba canola farmer says he feels abandoned by both the federal and provincial governments. This is Information Radio on CBC. Right now, we turn to our CBC Winnipeg newsroom and Heather Wells.
Good morning. Well, new details have emerged about the 2007 death of Crystal Saunders and the lengths police went to solve her murder. Saunders' body was found in a ditch south of Lake Manitoba in 2007. No credible suspect was identified until 2014 when DNA found on her neck led to a match. We'll hear what police did next. And a Winnipeg family lost everything in a Saturday night house fire in River East. Larry Hobson had just dropped groceries off at his son's house on Hathaway Road, and then a couple hours later, his son called to say their home was burning. Hobson says his son and partner were able to get all 5 children out. The Canadian Red Cross has now put them up in a hotel. I'll be back with more Manitoba news at 7:30.
All right, thanks very much, Heather. And if you're just joining us, maybe you've heard what's in the forecast, but I'll let Abby say the word.
We are going to be seeing a mix of cloudy skies, snow, and cold temperatures across the province today. It's going to vary from the south to the north. Conditions in Winnipeg at this time, -8. It is cloudy outside. Some snowflakes are clocking in this morning as the cloud sticks around with some breezy conditions from the northeast, and we'll be reaching a high of -2. Tonight, the snow takes its leave. It's going to be leaving after the midnight period, making way for clear conditions and calmer winds, and we'll see the temperatures drop to around -8. In other regions, yes, we'll see that snow, cloudy conditions in most areas with colder temperatures as you travel north. But for Winnipeg today, the snow will be moving in this morning under cloudy skies. We get to a cool high of -2 and then some clearing overnight. Right now, -8 in the city.
Thank you, Abby.
Thank you.
May McKillop is checking traffic for us this morning. And May, we have a couple of things drivers should know about.
A couple notes, here in the city of Winnipeg, northbound Route 90 between Ellis and Dublin. I got a call about some debris covering the road. It was particularly bad at Sargent and Route 90 Century there on northbound. As well, we have a closure. Louis Bridge is closed for maintenance today, from 9 to 5. So plan alternative route for that closure. That's all I have to report so far, but anything else going on in the commute, give me a call and I'll pass that message along. The number to call, 204-788-3093.
A young woman from Buffalo Point First Nation who was a victim of a hit and run says she was targeted and now wants justice. 25-year-old Margaret Cobanis Jr., who also goes by Macy, was walking south of Osborne Village alone early Saturday morning. She says a white van started following her and then ran her over, leaving her on the street with broken bones. Winnipeg police are still investigating. A rally was held outside the Health Science Centre Saturday afternoon demanding justice for Macy. CBC Santiago Arias spoke with Macy over the phone from her hospital bed yesterday post-surgery. She explains how it all happened.
Well, I was making my way to go play pool at Sonics, and my Uber driver happened to cancel their ride, and I got dropped off in front of the bingo hall on Osborne, and I ended up having to walk. And I was coming up towards the Osborne Bridge underpass, and there was a white van pulling up, and it stopped. So I proceeded to walk, and we've made eye contact, so I was really sure that I was safe to walk across. And I got to the passenger side of his vehicle, and he pressed on the gas, and I fell to the ground. I tried getting up, and he ran right over me, which was very slow. It wasn't anything fast, so that probably went on for about, I'm not sure how long, but it felt like a very long time. That's all I could tell you right now. It's a little traumatizing, and I'm still in shock talking about it. So
it's completely understandable.
Yeah.
Do you remember anything of what happened after that?
I remember everything. I remember every little break, crack, and the screams. I was trying to tell him to stop. I remember crying out for my mom and dad. I knew it was intentional because he backed up on me and then he drove over again. And then he sped off really fast. And there's a cab driver that was behind him too, and he didn't even bother checking on me. And then I found myself trying to get up. I was just trying to stand up, but my bones felt like jello. I knew something was broken, and I just fell to the ground, and I was trying to drag myself off the street because I thought I was going to get hit by another vehicle because of how small I was, and I knew vehicles wouldn't be able to see me. I couldn't walk at all. I was dragging myself. There was a man who came running over to me, but he said that he didn't see anything, but he heard a woman like yelling, and yeah, that's all he said. He came and helped me, and I was trying my best to talk, but he couldn't understand, and he called 911. And then there was another male too who pulled over and asked if I was okay, and he was helping out, and that's when they called the ambulance for me and the cops. After, it was just, I was in shock. Everything was happening so fast. I was trying to process what was happening. I thought I was going to die because I couldn't breathe. I was blacking in and out. I was actually taken in fast. My family showed up within like 20 minutes to close to 45 minutes.
What have doctors told you about your injuries?
My shoulder, rib, my collarbone, and pelvic. Everywhere else is just like road burns, I guess you could say, and like there's a big scratch on my back from when I was underneath the vehicle.
And have you undergone any surgeries since?
Yes, I went for one last night.
And so, moving away from what happened and about more of your feelings throughout this experience, when all of this happened, what you remember was going through your head?
I thought I was next. That was my only thought.
Yesterday when I was at the rally, your father kept saying that you wanted your story to be heard and to be known.
Because there are so many unsolved cases that a lot of my people have been going through, and no one's listening. And I survived, and I'm here to tell my story.
Before all of this happened to you, being a First Nations woman walking down the streets of Winnipeg, how has it felt?
I've always felt that I wasn't safe wherever I went.
You have 2 little daughters, right?
Yes.
Have you seen her? Have they visited you at the hospital?
No, their father told me they're worried for me, but we don't want to tell my daughters what's happening because I don't want them to be afraid or for them to see me, you know.
And there was a part of what your family was saying yesterday that you thought that you were going to be kidnapped yesterday. Yeah, what was giving you that indication?
There was a big white van, and then there was a taxi driver behind the van, and that was just really obvious and suspicious. I believe that's probably one of the ways that some of our women and children go missing. That's just what I believe. But I feel angry. Like I don't even want to be at the hospital right now. I want to be out there looking too. I want to get my own answers. I feel like people don't even care now because I'm getting hate text online. Like people aren't believing in me, and I feel angry.
That was Margaret Cobinas Jr. speaking with the CBC Santiago Arias. Winnipeg police are still investigating.
We carry a world of information in our pockets because we want to know. Breaking news that shapes our world. Staying on top of stories around the globe. And connected close to home. It's news you can trust. Delivered when you want and where you want. On Canada's News app. Now with CBC Radio 1. Local and live. Download the CBC News app for free.
At 7:20, it is -8 degrees here in Winnipeg. Periods of snow for us today with a high of -2. I'm Margo Watt in for Marcy this morning. Thank you for joining us. Well, if you think your St. Patrick's Day celebrations have tradition, how about Montreal? Yesterday, they were dancing, laughing, likely imbibing at the 200-year anniversary of their event. The St. Patrick's Day Parade started there in 1824 and has been going on every year almost since then. Here's the full story with the CBC's Rowan Kennedy.
Montreal's St. Patrick's Day Parade is 200 years old. The first one started here on St. Paul Street in 1824, and the vibe was a little bit different than the one we know today. It was a group of 30 wealthy businessmen celebrating their Irish heritage, although news reports say they were far from sober, so maybe not all that different. That kicked off one of Montreal's oldest running traditions.
The history is there.
That's Alan Hustack. He literally wrote the book on the Montreal parade. Yes, there's a whole book's worth of history there.
The history of the parade really is the history of Montreal.
In 1834, the St. Patrick's Society was founded to help organize the annual parade. By 1860, the community grew after 500,000 Irish immigrants came to Quebec. Some were Protestant, but most were Catholic, making the parade a source of tension.
It started as an Irish nationalist sort of a demonstration. Then it morphed into a more Catholic procession.
Each parish had its parade. Parishes feuded with one another over who had the right parade.
Since its earliest days, a grand marshal with a colorful sash has led the march, and a queen has followed in a special float. Military regiments, pipes, and drums are also a staple of parades across North America.
In general, it's not something that's native to the island of Ireland. It was originally a military tradition by Protestant Unionist regiments to commemorate the patron saint's day of their homeland. And now, of course, it's kind of associated with the wearing of the green, which would be a more nationalist Catholic symbol.
One of the great things about the parade, in my view, is that it has moved from a strictly religious observation into this great, diverse festival that is really a rite of spring in Montreal.
The official parade has been canceled at least 4 times, when the Pope died in 1878 and when a Montreal pastor died in 1902. Then, during the COVID-19 pandemic, it was canceled twice, so it's not exactly the 200th parade.
We're not that great at math, but we certainly determined that this would be the year that we celebrate the 200th of the parade.
The march has moved to different streets over the years. Now it's usually on St. Catherine. While it may not be very nationalist or Catholic anymore, it's still a way for people to feel Irish, at least for a day.
CBC's Rowan Kennedy with the story of Montreal's 200-year-old St. Patrick's Day Parade. A little bit of Whiskey in the Jar for you by Winnipeg band The Dust Rhinos, and they'll be playing tonight at the West End Cultural Centre for a St. Patrick's Day party. Things get started at 7 o'clock. It is 7:25. Time now for the Sports Report with Scott Regehr. Hey, Scott.
Is it wrong to feel like I want to be in a pub right now after listening to that music, Margaret?
I don't think it's surprising.
No.
Given the music, given my green shirt. I mean, what else do you want on a St. Patrick's Day?
No, it gets you in the mood, that's for sure.
It does. Well, we're in a very good mood here because, of course, the Jets got off to a very winning start on their road trip.
Yeah, although it wasn't easy.
No.
Backup goalie Eric Comrie-Margot was in net to start. Less than 5 minutes in, he was bowled over by a Seattle forward. Concussion spotters pulled Comrie from the game for about 10 minutes before determining he was good to return. The Kraken scored in the meantime, and then when Comrie returned, before Winnipeg eventually responded. They did so through goals by Cole Perfetti and Kyle Connor, and then in overtime, an unlikely hero, defender Dylan Samberg, tickling the twine, his first ever OT winner, although Comrie says it shouldn't be his last.
Well, I mean, you see it every single day. He does a lot of goalie drills, and he does a lot of those backdoor plays, and he can sneak a few in. So he knows what he's doing out there. Don't get me wrong. I mean, it's always the guys that do more goalie shooting tend to know how to squeak those ones in, and he does a lot of goalie shooting before practice. So it's tip your cap to Wade Flaherty and Connor Hellebuyck and myself for that one, because it's all that shooting before practice he does.
Yeah, there you are. Wade Flaherty, the Jets goalie coach, of course. I think I still have his hockey card. Winnipeg continues to lead the entire league. Back in action tomorrow against the Vancouver Canucks. And before we step away from local sports, Margot, congrats to the U of M Bison's women's volleyball team winning the national title for the first time in 11 years over the weekend. They downed the Montreal St 3-1. Well done.
So exciting. We are hoping to do an interview with the coach of the team coming up after 8 o'clock here on the show. So let's go further afield to South Korea, where the World Women's Curling Championship is going on. How has Canada been doing?
Okay, pretty well, as expected, since Rachel Homan is the country's skip. Another win against Denmark this morning, Margot. That means Canada sits at 3-1. The Ottawa native Homan was her analytical self in assessing her performance.
We read the lines pretty good, and we capitalized on some of the mistakes, and kind of outdrew drew ourselves out of trouble there. A couple times they had us, and we were able to get away with it with a couple of precise draws. So some really good team shots.
If Homan doesn't sound overly exuberant there, that could be down in part to fatigue, Margot. The rule of thumb for travel: allow 1 day of recovery for every time zone that you cross. Homan's team has been in Korea for a week as of today, but is playing 11 time zones away from home. Canada will take on the equally jet-lagged Americans tonight. That goes at 6, to be clear. That is 6 o'clock in the central time zone.
All right, thank you. And let's finish sports globetrotting this morning with an historic soccer feat in England.
Yeah, courtesy of Newcastle, Margot, which beat Liverpool yesterday to win the Carabao Cup. It is Newcastle's first domestic trophy in 70 years, and champagne-soaked manager Eddie Howe talked about its significance.
If you can smell a strange smell, that's me. Drenched in whatever it is, alcohol, I think, by Joe Linton and the rest of the squad. But a great moment, and that's what it's all about. It's amazing what football can do. It's one of the rare sports that has that ability to give people days that they'll always remember. With such a long wait for a trophy, this will be a day that I'm sure everyone will never forget. We will never forget it. I certainly won't.
Despite boasting legendary players like Alan Shearer, Peter Beardsley, Kevin Keegan over the years, this is Newcastle's first trophy on home soil since their FA Cup victory in 1955. So those enjoying their green beer today for St. Paddy's Day, maybe raise a glass to the black and white striped team from Northern England.
Fantastic. Thanks so much, Scott.
You bet.
Our sports report was Scott Reguer, and we have just confirmed that interview now with University of Manitoba women's volleyball coach Ken Bentley. Ken will join us at 8:20 to talk about the big win the team scored over the weekend. So that's still to come here on Information Radio. And also coming up here on the program, why one Manitoba canola farmer says he feels abandoned by both the federal and provincial governments. CBC News is next.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Heather Wells in Winnipeg. At 7:30, it's -7. It's St. Patrick's Day, but the color won't be green. It might be white. Periods of snow beginning this morning, lasting right through the day. A high today of -2. New details have emerged about the 2007 death of Crystal Saunders and the lengths police went to solve her murder. CBC I-Team's Caroline Bargout reports.
Crystal Saunders was 24 years old when her body was discovered in a community on the shore of Lake Manitoba. 7 years later, the DNA evidence found on her neck matched Kevin Q, which was obtained when he was investigated for sexual assault in BC. RCMP believed he had killed Saunders, so they set up a Mr. Big operation. These details are all revealed in search warrant documents obtained by CBC News. Undercover officers spent 7 months getting close to Q. going to Canucks games, and skydiving. They even staged a hotel room to look like something violent had happened, which Q helped clean up. The investigation ended in January 2024. That's when Q was charged. His trial starts in September. Caroline Bargout, CBC News, Winnipeg.
A Winnipeg family lost everything in a weekend house fire in River East. It happened just before 8 Saturday night. Larry Hobson had dropped groceries off at his son's house on Hathaway Road earlier that evening. His son called later saying the home was on fire.
These things can happen, but you never think they're going to happen to you or your kids or your family. So yeah, it's devastating.
Hobson says the parents were able to get all 5 kids out, aged 7 months to 11 years. They were taken safely to a neighbor's. They had no renter's insurance and lost all their belongings. The Canadian Red Cross has put them up at a hotel for now. A woman from Buffalo Point First Nation feels like she was intentionally targeted in a hit and run. Margaret Kobanes says she was walking near Osborne Station early Saturday morning. She says a white van knocked her to the ground and drove over her before backing up and speeding off.
I was in shock. Everything was happening so fast. I was trying to process what was happening. I thought I was going to die because I couldn't breathe. I was blacking in and out.
The mother of 2 is now recovering from surgery. She believes the crash was intentional, arguing the driver would have helped had it been an accident. Winnipeg police are investigating. Just a matter of days after being sworn in as Prime Minister, Mark Carney is in Paris for talks with French President Emmanuel Macron.
With you, Mr. President, I want to ensure that France and the whole of Europe works enthusiastically with Canada, the most European of non-European countries, determined like you to maintain the most positive possible relations with the United States.
Carney's comments suggesting the Trump administration's ongoing tariff campaign on Canada and on countries around the world will dominate his talks today with Macron. But the war in Ukraine is also on the agenda, with Carney again pleading to maintain Canada's support for the Ukrainian war effort. You can hear the latest national and international news coming up on World Report at 8. The journey of the Saisi Dene people was on display through art at the Canadian Museum for Human Rights. The art of Jedrick Tharassi illustrates their forced relocation from their territory in northern Manitoba to Churchill in 1956 and their eventual return to their land and traditional way of life. Lionel Houston is the elder for Ndinaway, which partnered with the museum for this exhibit.
I hear about the Ojibwe, I hear about the Cree, I hear about the Sioux, but we don't hear about the Dene. And so he's going to be the one to share that and educate everybody.
Houston says the art is important because it can help all Manitobans learn about the province's history. Well, they are the national champs. In front of a sold-out crowd at the University of Manitoba, the Bison's women's team beat the University of Montreal 3-1. It is the first national championship for the Bison women's volleyball team since 2014. At the final buzzer, player Katrina Bentley dropped to her knees. She is the daughter of head coach Ken Bentley.
Oh my gosh, it's the best feeling in the entire world. I can't even describe it to you. Him and I have been working together every day, day in, day out at practice, and he's just really made me both the human and the player that I am today. So to do this both with him and for him is amazing.
This is the last game for Bentley, along with a number of other players who have been on the roster for the past 5 years. And taking it in overtime.
Perfetti to the net, Sandberg scores!
Dylan Sandberg in overtime on TSN as the Jets hand it to the Kraken 3-2. He scores on a pass from his former roommate, Cole Perfetti.
We've been talking to each other about hooking up and connecting on a goal for quite some time now, and we're fortunate enough to get 2 tonight.
Perfetti scored in the first period on a pass from Sandberg. The Jets now in first place in the NHL standings, 2 points ahead of the Washington Capitals. And Winnipeg continues their road trip tomorrow in Vancouver. You can find more news updated throughout the day at cbc.ca/Manitoba.
Thanks, Heather.
You're welcome.
Let's take a look at the Manitoba forecast and current conditions across the province. Here's Abby.
We are looking at a cloudy day, a snowy day, and some breezy conditions for much of the province today. Expect light snow in many regions and cold temperatures overall. For Winnipeg at this time, we are now at -7. The snow will be starting anytime soon. The day will stay cloudy with that snow coming and going. Breezy northwest winds will accompany that, and we'll see highs around -2. Now tonight, that snow tapers off, and then we see some clear conditions. Temperature returns to -8. Then for tomorrow, we see some sunny skies and light breeze. Similar conditions we're seeing in the Pembina Valley region from Morden, Morris, Winkler, turn all the way to the U.S. border. We're already seeing some snow in that part of the province with temperatures around -6. Expect this to continue throughout the day. That region should be seeing 2 to 4 centimeters of snow, warming to -2. The snow should end after midnight for folks in that part of the province. In Brandon, -9 at this time, mostly cloudy skies you're waking up to. Snow is also expected today. You should be getting 5 to 10 centimeters in some areas once this system passes through that region. Light winds will continue, and then you see highs around -5. Also, the snow will take you into tonight when it ends. In the Parkland region, Dauphin -16, cloudy conditions we have now. Snow is also likely throughout the day. We'll see highs around -6, and then tonight it tapers off. Looking at conditions in the Interlake region, Gimli is sitting at -14 with cloudy conditions. We should see some snow later in the day, and that would continue into the afternoon period. Expect some light breeze from the northeast. Highs will be around -2. In the powerful influence surrounding areas, we're seeing the temperatures hovering around -31, -32 at this time. Partly cloudy skies we get. The day will start sunny for you. The clouds will move in by the afternoon period. You'll be warming to around -6 for today. Thompson is at -30. Clear skies we have there. You should see some sun at any moment now, though it still feels bitterly cold with the wind chill factored in. You warm up to -9 later. Further north in Churchill, -22. We're getting blowing snow in that part of the province at this time. The day will feature more of snow. There's still lots of snow in the forecast for folks in Churchill with breezy conditions. Highs will be around -16. Now, this blowing snow continues into the overnight period, so you should be seeing some windy conditions there. Across board, we're looking at snowy conditions, cloudy conditions, and cold temperatures, especially in the northern part of the province. But right now, Winnipeg, we are at -7, expecting the snow to begin soon.
All right. Thank you, Abby.
Thank you.
And May is following the commute. A few problems for drivers this morning.
A couple of issues. Yeah, I'm looking at an area northbound Route 90 between Ellis and Dublin. I got a call about some debris covering the road, and that debris is kind of the worst spot of it. It spreads from Ellis to Dublin, but the worst spot of it is at Route 90 and Sargent. As well, I got a call about a stalled vehicle in the middle lane northbound Main Street Bridge. So keep right to pass that stalled vehicle. As well, we got a call about another stalled vehicle on westbound McGilvery at Waverley. The stalled vehicle is in the turning lane onto Waverley. So use caution to pass that area. As well, one closure we're seeing today, the Louise Bridge is closed for maintenance from 9 to 5 today. That's all I have to report right now. But if you are out there in your morning commute and you're seeing anything get in the way, whether it's a stalled car, a vehicle, traffic lights that don't work, slippery sidewalks, anything like that, give me a call and I'll pass that message along to our fellow commuters. The number to call is 204-788-3093.
All right, May, thanks very much.
You're welcome.
And now the latest in our special series produced by filmmaking students in the CREATE program at Sisler High School in collaboration with CBC Manitoba. This week, we meet Paul Kretschmer, a Winnipeg record collector like you've never seen. In fact, he has so many vinyls and CDs of his favorite and not so favorite bands through the decades that he lives in an old warehouse just to house them all. But a life-changing event has now left him rethinking his passion, which is why you may also see him at Mulvey Market selling his wares. CREATE students Marcus Penner, Gianluca Calderola and Joshua Soriano produced this short video. Here now is their story. The first person you'll hear from is Paul Kretschmer.
In the last while, it's like time travel is kind of real. In your mind, that is. I can put on that record and I can remember where I was when I first heard it and those experiences I had when I first heard a lot of that music. The first real LP that I got was that Beatles Hey Jude record, yeah. Yeah, even got my mom's name written on it. I remember being around 12 years old is when I really started collecting more, because I remember going downtown and it was really cool being in these stores too. Here they are, they're playing the music and again, all this beautiful vinyl all around, and I was kind of in awe. Most of this wall is records. And then I got CDs in front. I live in a warehouse, and I would travel a lot, and I would collect records and stuff, and collect music, and they would just end up in some of these storage lockers. But then when I finally found this one space I'm in, it's like, great, I can have everything in one spot. I almost sort of consider my place almost like a bit of a museum, really, because it's wall-to-wall collections in every room. The main living area is 14 by 14. The left wall is all records, the right wall is all records, the front wall is all CDs, and we're talking about 12-foot high ceilings, so I'm surrounded by it, yeah.
Be your mirror.
I got to meet Lou Reed in the late 90s. I went to see his concert at the Queen Elizabeth Theatre, waited by the stage door, and he shows up, and I had a handful of Lou Reed CDs. I was the first one in his face, and I said, "Hey Lou, looking forward to the show, and would you mind signing these?" And he just kind of groaned because he saw the big stack, and he said, "Wait." And he went and signed everyone else's one piece that they had, and then he came back to me and he said, "Okay, here," and he signed every single one of them.
One song.
I shop at Doug's booth because he's got an assortment of things you really can't find in many places these days. Nostalgia hunters and people who just want to explore bits of historical pop culture. His stuff is top-notch.
Shortly after I moved into that warehouse, I had some major car accidents, 2 within 2 months, and I could not walk for a while. And my life kind of really changed, and you really rethink everything. And I'm thinking, wow, if that was fatal, my family would have had to deal with my whole collection, and where would it have ended up, kind of thing. And now I have another one, and yeah. Now I'm realizing, holy smokes, I got doubles, I got triples of some things. So this is a great outlet to get rid of all my doubles and to share music. See, to me, music, I'm very passionate about music. Love it. Knowing that some of my really valuable to me stuff will go to a great home and where someone will appreciate it, kind of thing. I love that idea.
That was vintage vinyl collector Paul Kretschmer. Before him, you heard from Mulvey Market customer Paul Gubernachuk. The story was produced by Create students Marcus Penner, Gianluca Calderola, and Joshua Soriano, with support from CBC Manitoba. For more on this story, just check out our website at cbc.ca/Manitoba. Let's get to know another Juno nominee. The awards are coming up fast at the end of this month. Jake Vataland is a 21-year-old musician from Cutknife, Saskatchewan. His album, Retro Man, More and More, is up for Best Traditional Roots Album. So from that album, here's Retro Man.
People laugh and stare as I walk by in my long tail coat and my tie. So I just tell them this when they ask me why. I'm a retro man with a retro plan. I'm a retro man with a retro plan and the finest hair in the land. I'm a retro man with a retro plan. I like to be myself 'cause I can. To dress up fine and I slick my hair. All the girls like to laugh at what I wear, but I just walk on by 'cause I don't care. I'm a retro man with a retro plan. I'm a retro man with a retro plan and the finest hair in the land. I'm a retro man with a retro plan. I like to be myself 'cause I can. I like that old time way living off the land. I even built my home with my hand. And I'll tell you why I'm this old time vet. I'm a retro man with a retro plan. I'm a retro man with a retro plan and the finest hair in the land. I'm a retro man with a retro plan. I like to be myself 'cause I can. I like to be myself 'cause I can.
And that is Jake Vataland with the song Retro Man from his Juno-nominated album, Retro Man More and More. For more information on all the Juno nominees, you can head to CBC Music.
The United States has been ripped off.
The stories that matter.
Canada will be responding
as they happen.
We must put Canada first.
At home and around the world.
We don't need the products that they have.
And what they mean to you. For news you can trust.
We're coming to you live.
Stay with CBC News.
Well, over the last few months, there's been a lot of talk about American tariffs and Canada's counter-tariffs. But some farmers here in our province say it's time for us to shift our focus. China plans to impose a 100% retaliatory tariff on all Canadian canola products starting this Thursday. This move comes after Canada imposed duties on electric vehicles from China. Jason Johnson operates a grain farm in Darlingford near Morton, just a mile away from the U.S.-Canada border. He's concerned about what these particular tariffs could mean for him and other Manitoba canola farmers. Jason joins us via Zoom this morning. Hello, Jason.
G'day.
Let's talk about what's at stake here. What could the Chinese tariffs mean for you and your farm?
Well, I mean, it's for my farm in particular. We farm about 2,500 acres, and on any given year, we probably average about 1,000 acres of canola on our farm. Right now, in the week since this announcement has been made, canola has dropped $2 a bushel. So on my farm, that would mean about an $80,000 loss every year.
Wow. And you're not alone.
You know, the canola industry in Canada is huge. You know, we on par and even greater than any of steel, auto manufacturing, or aluminum. And what I'm upset about is that so far our government has not acknowledged farmers at all.
So what have you heard from government?
Nothing. It's been dead silence.
What would you like to hear and see from both levels of government?
Well, in this instance, Canada is actually the instigator. And so to my frame of thinking, Canada is actually the one in the wrong here. And because this is a retaliatory tariff for Canada placing a tariff on steel, aluminum, and electric cars and electric car parts to China. You know, this happened back in October of last year, and it was largely done to align ourselves with the U.S., and they placed similar or exact same tariffs on China as well, and they wanted Canada and Mexico to impose the same tariffs to be in alignment with the U.S. So basically, we did it as a favor to the U.S. Well, since then, the U.S. has kicked us in the teeth, and so why are we kowtowing to what they want? I mean, and the industries that are being protected, like I say, are steel, aluminum, and auto manufacturing, which incidentally happens to all pretty much happen in Ontario and Quebec. Well, who is being hurt by this? The Canadian farmer all across Canada. And we are price takers. We don't set the price of what our product markets for. We are price takers. We have no say in this at all. We didn't instigate this at all. And yet, our politicians down in Ottawa have been completely silent on it. I mean, Mark Carney, the first day he was in office, where did he end up? He was in a steel mill talking to steel workers. But there has been not a word said to Canadian farmers. And Canadian farmers need to know what's going to happen. Is there going to be compensation? Are they going to look to remove these tariffs? To my mind, we should be going back to China and saying, let's remove these. We were wrong. Be upfront. We were wrong. If Canada wants to be, says they are about free trade, so let's demonstrate it. Go back to China and say, we were wrong imposing our tariffs. If we lift ours, will you lift yours? And I'm almost certain they would do that. It would be a good deal for them. It would be a good deal for us. Why are we doing this?
These tariffs are set to come down Thursday, as you know. Do you have any hope that something might happen before then?
I really don't. And unfortunately, this comes down to Canadian politics. In Canada, the Liberal base is almost entirely in Ontario and Quebec. And that's where these jobs are in Ontario and Quebec. Where does the Liberals not get any votes? Across the Canadian prairies, particularly from farmers. And so, unfortunately, we have no political pull with the Liberals in any way, shape, or form. Now, I mean, if they were in favor of Canada first and not Liberal first, then I would be hopeful of some action. But if you look at the Liberal Party, what if they were in favor of Canada first? They wouldn't have prorogued government and kneecapped our government in the face of U.S. trade threats. And so to me, their agenda is not Canada first; it's Liberal first.
We know that recently Ottawa announced some tariff relief measures, including about $1 billion in new financing through the Farm Credit Corporation, Farm Credit Canada, rather. Will that help you in any way?
Those are loans. That's not a gift. That's just money money being available for when you get in trouble. We will help you go into more debt. Well, how about, incidentally too, so canola dropping $2 a bushel, that is our entire profit margin. There is no profit left in canola at all, not even close. We are definitely in the red on canola at these prices.
What does that mean then going forward? Can canola growers like yourself, can you survive this?
We will have to grow some canola acres still in order to, just for rotational reasons. We've got to do what's best for the land. And so there will be still lots of canola acres go in this year, even though it will be at a loss. You have to grow something. But we are actively seeking other options to grow. But the thing is that the market for the other options is only so large. And so consequently, the risk of flooding those other markets is rather great as well. canola is by far the largest oil seed grown across Western Canada. Or non-wheat or grass type of crop.
Right. How would you even begin to describe what these days are like for you? The frustration of not hearing perhaps as much of a conversation about these tariffs compared to the other tariffs that have been dominating the news, and knowing the losses that you're facing very, very shortly.
I understand that we are very much focused on the U.S. and as I am as well. I am very much in favor of standing strong in fighting the U.S. on their tariffs. But China is a different story. China did not instigate this. We are the instigators of the ones with China. So we need to be making it right with China. If the U.S. is not going to be a favorable trade partner anymore, why are we not? China is a huge market. Why are we not seeking out that market and doing what we can to fulfill that market?
Jason, we'll have to leave it there for now, but hopefully we can touch base with you some more on this issue in the coming days and weeks. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Jason Johnson is a grain farmer just south of Darlingford, Manitoba. At 7:57 now, let's turn to our Winnipeg newsroom with Heather Wells.
Good morning. Well, new details have emerged about the 2007 death of Crystal Saunders and the lengths police went to solve her murder. Saunders' body was found in a ditch south of Lake Manitoba in 2007. No credible suspect was identified until 2014 when DNA found a match. We'll hear what happened then. And a family of 7 lost everything they owned in a weekend house fire in River East. Happened at a bi-level house on Hathaway Road just before 8 Saturday night. Larry Hobson says it is devastating for his son and their family. I'll be back with more Manitoba news at 8:30.
All right, thanks very much, Heather.
You're welcome.
Some traffic notes for you this morning. The Louise Bridge is closed today from 9 to 5, so you'll want to plan a different route. Westbound McGilvery at Waverley, we have a stalled vehicle in the right turning lane, so watch for that. Northbound Main Street Bridge, we have a stalled vehicle in the middle lane, so you have to use the right lane to pass there. And northbound Route 90 between Ellis to Dublin, we got a call about some debris on the road. It's particularly bad in the right lane between Ellis to Sargent heading northbound. So thanks for all of your calls on traffic. If you have something other drivers ought to know about, 788-3093 gets you through to our commuter desk. As you're hearing on the news today, new details emerge about the 2007 death of Crystal Saunders and the lengths police went to try and solve her killing. The I-Team's Carolyn Bargout will be here at 8:10 to talk more about that. -8 degrees in Winnipeg with light snow starting to fall. Periods of snow today with a high of -2. I'm Margot Watt. You're tuned in to Information Radio here on CBC. World Report is next.
Five perceptive panelists, 5 blockbuster books, 4 days of smart and sassy deliberation and debate, but there can only be one winner. The best book to change the narrative. Hi, I'm Ali Hassan, and I'm hosting Canada's favorite book battle, Canada Reads 2025. One book to change the narrative. All this week on CBC Radio, TV, the Listen app, and CBC Gem. For more, go to cbcbooks.ca.
The CBC News is next. Coming up in half an hour, it's The Current with Matt Galloway.
Everything in the information age is designed to steal our attention. So says MSNBC host Chris Hayes. But he also says it's possible to take back control of our lives, our politics, and our future. Chris Hayes coming up on The Current.
This is World Report. Good morning. I'm Marcia Young. Prime Minister Mark Carney is in Paris on his first official visit abroad.
Le Canada est fort.
Canada is strong.
Nous allons être encore
Together, we will be even stronger.
Carney is wrapping up a meeting with French President Emmanuel Macron. Then he will be back on the plane to London. It is a busy day aimed at shoring up relationships with some of Canada's allies at a time when Ottawa's relationship with the United States is deteriorating. The CBC's Catherine Cullen is covering the trip. And Catherine, we just heard from the two leaders. What did they have to say?
It was a mix of warm words and warnings about economic and geopolitical crises. At a time when Canada is looking for support from its allies, French President Emmanuel Macron spoke of Canadians who fought on the beaches of Normandy and Canada's recent support of Ukraine. He talked about the problems caused by tariffs, including creating inflation, but he did not make an explicit, overt call for the U.S. president to back off on his attacks on Canadian sovereignty. Prime Minister Mark Carney made it clear he is on a mission to move closer to allies in terms of trade and security.
I want to ensure that France and the whole of Europe works enthusiastically with Canada, the most European of non-European countries, determined like you to maintain the most positive possible relations with the United States.
Earlier today, Carney visited the restored Notre Dame Cathedral, which was severely damaged by fire. Carney says it is a reminder that in a crisis, you must act.
What is next for the new Prime Minister?
Marcia, he's headed to London, where he'll have an audience with the King, then on to a meeting with UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer. Carney has suggested he isn't looking for allies to offer assurances that Canada will never become America's 51st state. But one senior official says on this trip, Carney is trying to, quote, double down on relationships with Canada's other allies.
Thanks, Catherine.
Thank you.
The CBC's Catherine Cullen reporting from Paris. U.S. President Donald Trump says his deportation of hundreds of Venezuelans over the weekend is legal, even though a judge ordered his administration not to proceed. More than 200 people were rounded up and flown to El Salvador without any due process. Trump's critics call his decision illegal. The CBC's Sarah Levitt is in Washington. And Sarah, take us through the details of what happened.
Yeah, both Trump and his press secretary speaking out on this, saying federal courts don't have a say on how the president deals with foreign affairs. This comes after the White House, using what's called the Alien Enemies Act, deported more than 200 alleged members of a Venezuelan gang. The videos show masked police bringing the prisoners off a plane in El Salvador, where they'll be held in prisons. On Saturday, a federal judge in the U.S. ordered a 14-day halt on all deportations invoked by the act, but the Trump administration said the planes carrying the Venezuelans were already in the air. Here's President Trump.
These were bad people. That was a bad group of, as I say, hombres. You look at them and you look at the crimes that they've committed. You take a look. You don't get any tougher. You don't get worse than that.
So Trump saying what these Venezuelan gangs have done is tantamount to war.
What's been the reaction to the deportation?
Well, El Salvador's president replying to a news headline about the judge's order, simply writing on social media, oopsie, too late. But there are lawyers questioning the lawfulness of the move. The American Civil Liberties Union was involved in the lawsuit against the Trump administration about the use of the Alien Enemies Act. Here's lawyer Lee Gellert.
I think we're on very dangerous ground here. This is as lawless an action as the administration has taken.
Critics also say this raises constitutional issues because government agencies are meant to comply with federal court rulings. The timing of the flights, the exact timings, will have to be looked at as well.
Thank you, Sarah.
Thank you.
The CBC's Sarah Levitt in Washington. Economists in China say Beijing needs to put more emphasis on domestic consumption. China's economy has been dependent on exporting products to international markets, but that's being undermined by the tariff war with the United States. Laura Westbrook reports from Hong Kong.
Speaking on China's state broadcaster, the National Bureau of Statistics spokesman Fu Lingwei says retail sales rose 4% in the first 2 months of this year. He says economic stimulus policies are beginning to take effect, but more measures are needed.
Given that the external environment has become more complex, some enterprises have difficulties in production operation.
China relies on exports as a key driver of growth to support its slow slowing economy. But as US tariffs threaten exports, Chinese policymakers say domestic demand is now a top priority. Economist Gary Ng says that's the right decision, but the problem is how to encourage more household spending.
For real improvement in China's consumer sentiment, we still need to see disposable income growing further and the return of wealth effect, but so far it has been quite challenging.
China is still dealing with high unemployment and a protracted property crisis. As trade tensions with the United States rise, official Fu Lingwei acknowledges achieving Beijing's 5% growth target this year will not be easy. Laura Westbrook for CBC News, Hong Kong.
In North Macedonia, authorities have arrested 15 people in connection to a weekend fire at a nightclub. At least 59 people were killed. It's believed pyrotechnics ignited the ceiling. Officials suspect bribery and corruption are linked to the fire. They say the nightclub did not have a license to operate. The end of the Hudson's Bay Company is happening quickly. The historic Canadian retailer is in court today applying to liquidate all 80 of its stores. Lisa Shing has more.
It's an institution Canadians across the country say they'll miss.
This was one of the last of the department stores that reflected a Canadian identity.
That's too bad, because I grew up with Hudson's Bay, so it's pretty sad.
A week ago, Hudson's Bay Company applied for creditor protection, hoping to keep the business afloat in some capacity. Then a dramatic development. It will start liquidating its entire business as soon as this week, putting more than 9,000 jobs at risk with no guarantee of severance or pension. Toronto lawyer Andrew Hatney represents some employees.
For the company to announce a potential liquidation so fast after filing before the court is unusually quick and very troubling.
In its court application, Hudson's Bay said it was struggling because of the drop in store traffic post-pandemic, people spending less, and Canada-US trade tensions. The filings show the company had just $3 million in the bank at the start of this year and owes nearly $1 billion to creditors, including to landlords and brands like Ralph Lauren and Estee Lauder. In a statement, the company said it made the decision after exhaustive efforts to secure sufficient financing to pursue a restructuring. Ken Wong is a marketing professor at Queen's University.
It has become a nostalgia brand. And nostalgia, unfortunately, is a luxury that really most people won't afford.
Pending court approval, the retailer plans to liquidate its inventory and close up shop by June 15th. Lisa Shing, CBC News, Toronto.
The only Gaelic athletic club in the Maritimes is trying to start a regional league for traditional Irish sports. The Halifax Gaels compete in Gaelic football and hurling. But right now, the club has to travel out of the province to compete with other teams. Gareth Hampshire has more on the push to change that.
Eugene McCabe, originally from County Cavan, Ireland, is one of the Gaelic football players, punching, kicking and catching the ball at a Halifax Gaels practice.
You learn this from when you're a kid. It's like hockey here. You grow up with that, starting from under fours all the way up to like senior level.
The game that requires skills used in soccer, rugby and basketball provides a chance for players who've left their home country to celebrate Irish culture, along with hurling, the other game the club plays, which is played with a stick and ball, a bit like lacrosse. The club has grown to about 30 members, but is looking for more competition. Recruitment officer Jen Skinner says they mostly practice against each other, with the closest other team in Quebec.
We don't get a lot of chance to play games. We train throughout the year, but we don't have a lot of times to compete. There's only a couple tournaments a year, and we have to travel for those.
For a small league of 4 teams, another 10 players will be needed. That's what the club's working on while preparing to travel to Montreal for a tournament where it will compete in games in May. Gareth Hampshire, CBC News, Halifax.
And that is the latest national and international news from World Report News anytime at cbcnews.ca. I'm Marcia Young.
Good morning. You're listening to Information Radio on CBC, 89.3 FM, 990 AM, on the app and on YouTube. I'm Margot Watts, sitting in for Marcy Marcusa. Coming up on the show, Crystal Saunders was found dead in a ditch in 2007. Search warrant documents obtained by CBC News detail the lengths the RCMP went to solve her murder, including deploying a Mr. Big sting. The I-Team's Caroline Bargut will be here to talk more about that. And the University of Manitoba Bisons are national champions. We'll talk with their head coach about their big win. This is Information Radio on CBC. Right now, let's get the very latest from our Winnipeg newsroom with Heather Wells.
Good morning. Well, a family of 7 lost everything they owned in a weekend house fire in River East. Happened at a bi-level on Hathaway Road just before 8 Saturday night. Larry Hobson says it's devastating. He says the house had insurance, but as a renter, his son's family did not. The Red Cross has provided the family temporary shelter at a hotel. A woman from Buffalo Point First Nation feels like she was intentionally targeted in a hit and run. Margaret Kobanes says she was walking near Osborne Station early Saturday morning. She says a white van knocked her to the ground and drove over her before backing up and speeding off. The mother of 2 now is recovering from surgery. I'll be back with more Manitoba news at 8:30.
All right, thanks very much, Heather. And we now have a light dusting of snow on the streets of Winnipeg. Abby, we're expecting a bit more today.
Yes, expect a snowy day across much of the province today, with conditions ranging from cloudy to breezy in the northern parts of the province. In Winnipeg right now, -7, mostly cloudy we're seeing, but periods of snow starting this morning. A breezy northeast wind will develop, and we'll see highs around -2 tonight. That snow should taper off after midnight. Then we see some clearing. Winds become lighter later in the evening. The temperatures will be around -8. And in other regions, looking across the province, a mix of snow and cloudy skies, and temperatures colder in the north and milder down south. For Winnipeg right now, -7, warming up to -2.
All right, thanks very much, Abby. Let's
you.
get the very latest on road conditions around the city and even out on the highways with the snow. Here's May.
We're seeing some snow. Yeah, we're definitely seeing partly covered conditions, mostly south of Winnipeg so far. I'm going to go to the city of Winnipeg now. We're seeing a lot of stalled vehicles and a couple closures on northbound Route 90 between Ellis and Dublin. Someone called to say that there is debris on the road. So it's particularly bad in the right lane between Ellis to Sargent heading north. As well, northbound Main Street Bridge, there's a stalled vehicle in the middle lane. Use the right lane to pass. And westbound McGilvery at Waverley, another stalled vehicle in the right turning lane onto Waverley. As well, we're seeing on northbound Waverley at Hearst, I've heard of another stalled vehicle that's right in the middle lane there. And also a bridge closure today. The Louise Bridge is closed from 9 to 5 today, so plan an alternative route for that area. That's all I have to share today, but we have a little bit more time for one more traffic hit, so give me a call with anything that you're seeing. The number to call is 204-788-3093.
A warning, our next story deals with the killing of a 24-year-old Indigenous woman. It's been nearly 18 years since Crystal Saunders' body was found in a water-filled ditch in St. Ambrose, Manitoba. The 24-year-old was discovered by an off-duty Mountie who was checking his trap lines. We also now know the lengths the RCMP went to try to solve this case. The I-Team's Caroline Bargut is here to talk more about that. Good morning.
Hi, good morning.
Before we get into some of the new information you have for us, remind us of some of the details of this case.
Well, it was on April 19th, 2007 that Crystal Saunders' body was discovered in that water-filled ditch in St. Ambrose, Manitoba. Now, that's a community on the southern edge of Lake Manitoba. For nearly 17 years, her death was unsolved. It was one of many cold cases involving missing or murdered Indigenous women and girls. Now, Saunders was Métis. In January 2024, RCMP charged Kevin Q, he's a 42-year-old Vancouver man, in her death. Now, these charges have not been proven in court.
And now we are learning more about what led police to charge him. What can you tell us about their investigation?
That's right. So Kevin Q appeared on the RCMP's radar back in 2014. Now, this is after his DNA was entered into a national DNA data bank. Now, that's because police were investigating him for 2 sexual assaults in BC. He was later convicted of 1 sexual assault and 1 assault, but police didn't charge him for nearly 10 more years. Now, even though his DNA matched DNA that RCMP found on Crystal's neck when her body was discovered. Now, according to search warrant documents that CBC News got copies of, RCMP believed that Q was her killer, but they wanted more evidence. So they used what's known as a Mr. Big operation. So they sent a group of undercover officers to Vancouver to befriend Q in hopes that he would eventually open up about Saunders' death and his potential involvement in it. Now, John O'Donovan is a retired Winnipeg police detective sergeant who is very familiar with Mr. Big operations. In fact, he ran one back in 2017, I believe it was. That's when he was trying to find Tina Fontaine's killer. You might remember she's the 15-year-old girl whose body was pulled from the Red River in 2014. Here's what O'Donovan had to say.
It's just not enough. It brings you up to 90%, but you need that 10% because in order to get a conviction in criminal court, it has to be beyond a reasonable doubt. They've got the evidence that leads them right up to this guy, and they need some kind of a confession to nail it to the wall.
So he's basically saying that DNA evidence is just not enough and that they would need a confession or something like that. Now, the Mr. Big sting lasted about 7 months and it started in June 2023. In January 2024 is when RCMP charged Q with second-degree murder.
So what do we know about the Mr. Big sting?
Well, we actually learned a lot of details through these search warrant documents about this undercover operation. They first tried it in February 2023. RCMP set up a scenario where one officer tried to make a connection with Q, but the documents say that Q appeared to be annoyed with this officer, and so they abandoned that scenario. They tried again in June 2023. So they had done surveillance on Q in Vancouver and learned, some of the things that he liked to do or where he liked to go. There was this pub they knew he liked to hang out at, so they ended up going to that pub to hang out. They started talking to Q, and then Q invited them to go on a boat ride the next day. For 7 months, Q and these officers hung out. They went to hockey games together. They went on a double date. They went skydiving and attended barbecues together. The officers also got Q involved in their supposed business. Now, they told him that they worked for a man who did some things that were illegal. Now, the most dramatic scenario that was in the search warrant documents is when the undercover officers staged a hotel room to look like something really violent had happened. Q and some of the other undercovers helped to clean it up. They also got the guy out of town. Now, John O'Donovan says undercover operations can be very intense.
It's almost like directing a movie, and they got to put so much effort into it. They have to be conscious all the time of what they're saying, that what they're saying is not going to jeopardize the entire project. And so it's not just, like I say, it's not just this 1 hour scenario that they're invested in. They're invested in this 100%, doing everything. This is their life, and it's not. It's a false life. So, it's a tough job.
So O'Donovan says that these officers did a really great job in identifying Q's weaknesses, which was he really wanted to belong to a group. O'Donovan says that they're accomplished. Oh, at one point, I should tell you that one of the officers Q told one of the officers that he loves him.
Oh.
Basically, in a friendly way.
Mm-hmm.
O'Donovan says that in itself is an incredible accomplishment.
For an undercover officer to come out and have some guy say, some murder suspect say, he's my best friend and I would do anything for him. That is like an amazing piece of work that these guys have done.
So you know how earlier O'Donovan was saying that police hoped to get a confession. We don't actually know whether or not they did get a confession because the search warrants don't say how this Mr. Big sting ended. But we do know that Q was charged in January of 2024. He has pleaded not guilty and his trial is expected to start in the fall.
So tell us a little bit, Caroline, about Crystal Saunders, the person.
Well, CBC News spoke to Saunders' family for the very first time recently. And they say that Crystal grew up in Winnipeg's William White neighborhood. She went to Strathcona Elementary School and St. John's High School. Her mom, Sandra, says that her daughter loved life and that everyone got along with her. She says that Crystal was smart, she was outgoing, she was loved by her family and her friends. But she had a difficult life. Her grandparents had alcohol abuse issues. Her mother, Sandra, says that she herself also struggled with substances in the past. So did Crystal. Lorna Brown Johnson is her cousin.
She was a good girl, just went astray. But, you follow the lifestyle that you grew up with until you learn you can do better.
Unfortunately, Crystal never had that chance. She was killed when she was just 24 years old.
Caroline, thanks very much.
Thank you.
Caroline Bargut is a reporter with CBC Manitoba's I-Team. She will have more on this story tonight on the CBC News at 6. You can also read about it on our website, cbc.ca/Manitoba. If you have a tip for the I-Team, you can call our confidential tip line at 204-788-3744 or email iteam@cbc.ca.
Here's to the bold. The Professional Women's Hockey League is back. Lace up, strap in, and tune in to Hockey Saturdays on CBC, where you can catch the best women's hockey players competing head-to-head with everything they've got. The puck drops Saturdays at 2 p.m. Eastern on CBC, CBC Gem, and cbcsports.ca. Don't miss it.
It is 8:21 here at CBC's Information Radio. Light snow and -8 degrees in Winnipeg. I'm Margot Watt. Great to have you with us this morning. The University of Manitoba Bisons are back on top of the Canadian University women's volleyball world. In front of a sold-out crowd at the University of Manitoba, the Bisons women's team beat the University of Montreal 3-1 to take the national title. Very happy to have Coach Ken Bentley with us this morning. Good morning.
Good morning. How are you? Sorry if my voice is a bit hoarse.
Why is it hoarse? Have you been celebrating and screaming?
Oh, well, all of it, actually. Yeah, and the crowd was crazy and it was sold out. It was amazing.
Yeah.
So it was just hard to kind of coach and, be heard. But it was all just amazing. So
yeah.
Thank you.
Well, congratulations on the win. Let's go back to that final buzzer. Could you tell us about that winning moment, what that was like, what was going on?
The play before our final play was actually one of our senior players had a great attack and hit the ball off hands, which would have been match point. But they didn't call it, unfortunately. That would have been a bit more heroic. But then when Montreal got the ball back, they served it in the net. So, but either way, it was fantastic because it was over. So, and it's just a sense of, amazement and also, in part relief because we have been, kind of on this road for a few years now and every season just chipping away and climbing the ladder. So to finally get there was just amazing. Yeah.
So such a huge moment for everyone on the team. And I understand it was quite an emotional moment for your daughter. Do you mind walking us through that?
Yeah. I mean, it's hard to talk about without getting too emotional, Yeah, I've got two daughters on the team, and we've been together on this journey since they played mini volley, and it was the sport that they gravitated towards, obviously because they were in the gym with me from such a young age, but it was still their choice, and they always kind of brought the ball to me, which was great, and then we just had this amazing journey through club volleyball and into university, and now there's these amazing accomplished women. But they've also played with a bunch of the players that I've coached for a long, long time, some of them from 15 years forward with our club program. So, yeah, it's just a really unique group that I don't think I'll be able to replicate again with respect to how long we've been together. So for that whole entire group of seniors, it was just really, really special.
And what an amazing journey to be on with your own children.
Yeah, I mean, listen, not every parent-coach kind of relationship and dynamic works wonderfully, So I count myself really lucky that we were able to just do such a great job of putting it in its place and not letting church and state kind of cross-pollinate too much. I think we did a really good job of that over the years with our family.
No arguing sports at the dinner table?
No, not well, maybe other sports, but not so much volleyball. So, yeah, really, I mean, I'm just so thankful for the journey. And I get to be a dad now, and so I'm excited about that also.
Right. And we were hearing on our newscast with Heather that one of your daughters, Katrina, fell to her knees at the final buzzer. Very, very emotional moment.
Yeah, I mean, when the ball hit the net, I think several people just fell to the floor like, holy mackerel, it happened. We really did it. So, yeah, it's just wonderful. I have to go back and watch the tape, because it was kind of surreal and just the amazing environment we played in all weekend. I mean, our staff did such an amazing job of putting on this championship. And, I think we set a new standard for execution of the event and the support we had from our community, and could not ask for a more wonderful weekend.
So after such a huge moment for all of you, what's next?
I'm hoping I get some sleep. That was in short supply this weekend, I'm not going to lie. And we're just going to be able to enjoy it a little bit. I'm actually off to Brandon this coming weekend because the men's national championships are there. And my son plays for the University of Winnipeg as a setter, and they won Canada West. So I get to go there and just be a dad and cheer him on when our whole family's going. And so I'm super excited about that. It's going to be a lot of fun. But for this week, I'm probably just going to try to lie low a little bit and revel in the win and just enjoy it. So that's the plan as of right now. And that could change rapidly, but for now, that's my plan.
Fantastic. Well, Ken, I know it's been a long, busy weekend for you and probably a slow-going morning, so thank you for making time for us.
Oh, you're more than welcome. I appreciate the call. Thank you. Have a great day.
You too. Take care.
All right. Okay, cheers.
Cheers. Bye. That is Ken Bentley, coach of the national champs, the University of Manitoba Bisons.
A spike in excitement comes to Brandon, and CBC will be there. The 2025 U Sports Men's Volleyball National Championship, March 21st to 23rd. Proudly sponsored by CBC and streaming on CBC Gem. Cheer on the best teams in Canada as they battle it out for the big prize. And visit us at the CBC booth Saturday. Visit cbc.ca/Manitoba/community for details.
Winkler and Morden, let's talk. CBC wants to get to know you a little bit better. I'm Rosanna Hempel. CBC's Communities in Focus is coming to Winkler and Morden March 17th to 21st. What do you want us to know about your communities? What stories are we missing? I can't wait to meet you. Visit cbc.ca/Manitoba/community for details.
It is 8:28, and coming up on Radio Noon today, we want to hear about your memories and stories of the Hudson Bay Company. We'll be talking with the curator of the HBC collection with the Manitoba Museum. So that's coming up on Radio Noon. The call-in starts at 12:30. You can also leave a message, though, if you're going to be busy later, if you have some thoughts now, and that number is 204-788-3797. Right now, we're getting quite a few calls on the traffic line about various issues. Let's get a recap with me.
It seems like there's stalled cars all over the city.
Oh, dear.
That's what I'm hearing about today, particularly on northbound Main Street Bridge. I heard about a stalled car in the middle lane, so use the right lane to pass there on northbound Main Street Bridge as well. Westbound McGillivray at Waverley, a stalled vehicle in the right turning lane onto Waverley. So use caution around that area. Similar to Waverley, sticking with the Waverley theme, northbound Waverley at Hearst, there's a stalled vehicle in the right middle lane. As well, today the Louise Bridge is closed from 9 to 5, so plan an alternative route. And earlier in the show, we heard about a little bit of debris on the road. This is northbound Route 90 between Ellis and Dublin, particularly bad around the Sargent Route 90 intersection. That's all I've heard about so far. If you want to give in one more traffic note or even an update to any of those areas, I'm standing by to take your call. The number to call is 204-788-3093.
All right. Thanks very much, May McKillop, tracking the commute for us this morning. You're with Information Radio here on CBC. Winnipeg News is next.
This is CBC News. Good morning. I'm Heather Wells in Winnipeg. At 8:30, it is -7. Some snow for St. Patrick's Day in Winnipeg. Periods of snow on and off throughout the day, lasting into the evening. -2 is our high. New details have emerged about the 2007 death of Crystal Saunders and the lengths police went to solve her murder. Saunders' body was found in a ditch south of Lake Manitoba in 2007. No credible suspect was identified until 2014, when DNA found on her neck matched Kevin Q. DNA obtained while he was investigated for sexually assaulting a BC woman. Search warrants documents obtained by CBC News show RCMP staged a Mr. Big operation to find out what Q knew about Saunders' death. Former Winnipeg Police Detective Sergeant John O'Donovan is familiar with Mr. Big stings. He says DNA evidence is not always enough to guarantee a conviction.
They've got the evidence that leads them right up to this guy, and they need some kind of a confession to nail it to the wall.
Q was charged with second-degree murder in January of 2024. His trial is scheduled to begin in September. A family of 7 lost everything they owned in a weekend house fire in River East. Happened in a bi-level on Hathaway Road just before 8 Saturday night. Larry Hobson had dropped groceries off there for his son. 3 hours later, he got a call saying the house was on fire.
My son and his partner and their 5 children ran across to the neighbors, and my son ran to the fire department from here because it's a block away, and his bare feet. But he got his kids out, which is the main thing. The house is a write-up.
Hobson says the house had insurance, but as renters, his son's family did not. The 5 children range in age from 7 months to 11 years. The Canadian Red Cross has provided the family temporary shelter at a hotel. Well, just a matter of days after being sworn in as Prime Minister, Mark Carney is in Paris for talks with French President Emmanuel Macron.
With you, Mr. President, I want to ensure that France and the whole of Europe works enthusiastically with Canada, the most European of non-European countries, determined like you to maintain the most positive possible relations with the United States.
Carney's comments suggest the Trump administration's ongoing tariff campaign on Canada and on countries around the world will dominate his talks today with Macron, but the war in Ukraine is also on the agenda. The Hudson's Bay Company will be in Ontario Superior Court today to advance a creditor protection case. It's preparing for a potential wind down of its operations unless it can find a last-minute solution to save it. A closure of the entire business would mean job losses for more than 9,000 employees. The historic company, which now is under American ownership, is expected to seek legal permission from the court to liquidate its assets. A woman from Buffalo Point First Nation feels like she was intentionally targeted in a hit and run. Margaret Kobenis says she was walking near Osborne Station early Saturday morning. She says a white van knocked her to the ground and drove over her before backing up and speeding off.
I was in shock. Everything was happening so fast. I was trying to process what was happening. I thought I was going to die because I couldn't breathe. I was blacking in and out.
The mother of 2, now recovering from surgery, she believes the crash was intentional, arguing the driver would have helped had it been an accident. Winnipeg police are investigating. The journey of the Saisi Dene people was on display through art at the Canadian Museum for Human Rights. It was a one-day exhibition, the art of Jedrick Tharasi illustrating their forced relocation from their territory in northern Manitoba to Churchill in 1956, and their eventual return to their land and traditional way of life. Lionel Houston is an elder for Nidinaway, which partnered with the museum for this exhibit.
I hear about the Ojibwe, I hear about the Cree, I hear about the Sioux, but we don't hear about the Dene. And so he's going to be the one to share that and educate everybody.
Houston says the art is important because it can help all Manitobans learn about the province's history. He also says art is another way to open up a dialogue and enhance communication. You can find more on all these stories and stay in step with the news as it develops through the day. Just head to cbc.ca/Manitoba.
Thanks very much, Heather.
You're welcome.
the CBC's Heather Wells. Let's take a look at the Manitoba forecast as the snow falls here in Winnipeg. Abby's back with us.
Across the province, we're looking at a snowy mix across the region. Down south, we should be expecting snow and breezy conditions. The Westman region will experience heavier snow. We're looking at 10 centimeters for the Brandon region once the system goes through. While up north, much colder, snow and wind chill. It really feeling cold in the at this time. Minus 31, Churchill minus 22 with blowing snow. Winnipeg minus 7 at this point and warming up to minus 2.
All right. Thanks very much, Abby.
Thank you.
And a quick check of traffic before we go, May.
The Louise Bridge is closed from 9 to 5 today, as well a couple of stalled vehicles westbound McGillivray at Waverley, as well on northbound Waverley at Hearst. Two stalled vehicles. Thank you.
Thank you, May. And thanks to all the people who worked on the show today. Donna Carrero, Jim Agapito, Chidi Akuma. From our newsroom, I-Team reporter Caroline Bargout. Also from our newsroom, Heather Wells, Megan Ketchison, Joni Nicolo. Our live team, May McKillop, Abby Adiyemi, and our YouTube producer, Kevin Nipatebo. Thanks for being here, for giving us your time. And stumbling, that's never a good sign. Nellie Gonzalez is the show producer of our Current Affairs unit, and Leif Larson is the senior producer of audio. I'm Margot Watt. Great to be here with you today. Marcy Marcusa is back tomorrow. I think I'm back on Wednesday, so I'll talk to you soon. The Current is next.